Madam Mayor, it's 6 o'clock and we're live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Tuesday, June 16th, regular City Commission meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo.
Here.
Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso.
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell. I can see him, but I can't hear him. Commissioner Omari Hardy is absent for the roll. Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Just made it, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, would everyone please rise for the invocation led by myself and followed by the pledge led by Commissioner Maxwell. First up. Almighty God, you are our creator and our sustainer. You are our light and our fortress. You are our wisdom and our strength. We ask for your guiding hand to lead us through this meeting. May we approach our tasks with wisdom, and may we approach our members with respect. May our conduct create an environment of cooperation and kindness. Thank you for helping us to accomplish our work this day. We ask these things in your powerful name. Amen.
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 Commissioner Maxwell, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one nation, under God,
God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
Thank you all so very much. We're going to move on to any additions, deletions, or reordering.
Madam Mayor, there's not an addition, deletion, or reordering, but there is one comment that I have to make on the on resolution 19, which is item. It's on the consent agenda. It's the first item on the consent agenda. The public hearing was going to be held on July the 7th, and now it's going to be held on July 21st. So there's nothing to change about it. It's just that the public hearing is going to be at a later date.
Okay, will that be reflected in the backup too, just in case anyone goes back and says you had the wrong date on there?
Well, it will be, but right now the backup says July the 7th. When we advertise it, we'll say July 21st.
Okay, sounds good. Then we don't need to accept the agenda as amended. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second,
second.
all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I don't know if Commissioner Hardy, I think Fordo.
Sorry, the office up here was locked. It's my bad,
no,
so I didn't vote.
that was the consent agenda. So I guess we'll just say at 4 votes because Commissioner Hardy was absent for that. Okay, we're going to move on to Commission Liaison reports and comments. I'm sorry, excuse me. I just completely bypassed. Oh, my poor Representative David Silvers. We're a little bit crazy here today, but you have a beautiful legislative update for us. Please let us know what has been going on.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay, I'm sure we've all been a little busy. First off, Madam Mayor and Commission, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present today. Legislative update of sorts. I will be presenting a little update on the legislature, but also just because the legislative session ended in mid-March doesn't mean that our job ended, and been continuing on and providing services to the district since then, and we'll be continuing forth as well. So let me just give you a little update. I don't know if have you had any updates from any other legislators since session ended in mid-March?
No.
Okay, so I'll give you some of the good and some of the bad of overall legislation and policy that was passed and then went through the chamber this past session. Good, I think, was very good. We'll start with the good before the bad. $450 million for teacher raises across the board, I think is great. We want to be able to keep great talent in our school system, and I think that's going to be one way to be able to do that. Also, the Sadowski Trust Fund, the Sadowski Housing Trust Fund was created 20 some years ago to be set aside for affordable and workforce housing in our state. Unfortunately, year in and year out, the trust fund had been swept into general revenue to make up for budgetary shortfalls. This was the first year, and I believe it's the first year ever that it hasn't been swept into general revenue, which is fantastic. So that's a couple $100 million. I think it's upwards of $400 million to go towards affordable housing and workforce housing in our state. I think that's, unfortunately, I don't think that's enough, but it's a good start. And the fact that it wasn't swept, I think, is a great start. Now, unfortunately, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, being in the city commission, attack on home rule. My 4 years in the legislature, I've never thought this would become a partisan issue or just an issue that certain leadership up in Tallahassee would be fighting what you're trying to do. You're trying to do your job. You're locally elected officials, whether it's in the city or the county. I don't understand why certain individuals or certain leadership individuals want to chip away at your position. And what's I find so frustrating is that we're a slow moving body. We meet for 60 days out of a year for session. And what if you have an issue at the local level? Now, let's just say one of those powers have been usurped and taken up at Tallahassee. Now you have to wait 6 months, 8 months, could be almost a year before you can get that issue resolved, because now there's been that attack on the home rule. So, but I've been fighting for home rule since been up there, and I think there's a lot of us in the Democratic caucus that have been. So we're going to keep fighting the good fight. So let me give you a little rundown of some legislation that I was able to pass this past session. I'm not sure if you know that, but mental health has been one of my priorities once I was elected in 2016. And every single year since I've been in the legislature, I've passed at least one piece of legislation on mental health, and focusing mainly on children in our school system and the Baker Act. So HB 945, I was able to pass through both chambers, and it's awaiting signature of the governor. It lays out the protocols and accountability for the mobile response teams. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill that passed in 2018 as a result of the tragedy and atrocity that happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas down in Broward County. Now, that bill laid out and paid for and created these MRTs, these mobile response teams, to analyze a lot of these situations where a lot of students are being Baker Acted. Now, what my bill does, it requires DCF and the Agency for Healthcare Administration to coordinate with one another for children that are going through the Baker Act or who are being Baker Acted. Now, if you're a child, say you're 17 and you're aging out of the system, there was in the past, there was no coordination. So now you're coordinating with ACA and DCF to make sure that there's a continuum of care once that child ages 18 and up and can get the help that they need. Now, with the mobile response teams in the legislation, it actually lists out accountability. They have to provide an annual update to the legislature and the governor for all the Baker Acts for children in our school system. And it also lays out protocols for them to de-escalate situations so the children are less likely to be Baker Acted. So a lot of people don't realize how many children are Baker Acted in our state annually. It hovers around 35,000 minors have been Baker Acted, or it's 35,000 Baker Acts with a minor. And unfortunately, there are a lot of children that are being Baker Acted on multiple times. So this will hopefully shine more of a light on this issue, and more attention and services will be given to those children that are in need. So just waiting for the governor to sign that bill. Also, a domestic violence injunction bill, HB 241. I was able to pass that with through both chambers. And this was an issue that was actually brought to the legislature, I think about 2 years ago. There were some people that were staying in abusive relationships out of fear of harm to the family pet. Some people may think that may not, because I brought this issue up with House staff, and they thought it was comical at first, and then they started doing some research and realizing this is a big issue, and we don't want to force anybody to stay in an abusive relationship out of fear of a family pet. And a family pet it's a family member. You don't want someone to threaten to kill their dog or maim their dog just if you file for divorce or if you leave somebody. And this would protect that individual and protects the family pet as a result. And hopefully less people will be stay in those abusive relationships. And HB 813, protection for vulnerable investors. Basically, if there's a red flag for an individual who may be retired, who's got a set amount of assets, and there's a purchase order or a sale order for a significant portion of their savings, and whatever it is, stocks, bonds, whatever. Certain individuals, like certified financial planners or assistants, can halt those trades to do a little due diligence, make sure that there's nothing nefarious going on, and making sure that nobody's being taken advantage of. And then there's an affordable housing bill 1459, which was actually amended into HB 1339, just assists in the development of affordable housing. As an individual, as a state representative who represents a district that has 4 CRAs, I'm well aware of the need for affordable and workforce housing. So I'm happy to have been able to get 1459 amended into 1339. Try saying that 10 times in a row, and getting that passed. And so that's actually been signed by the governor. So is the Vulnerable Citizens Bill, and so is domestic violence injunctions, just waiting on HB 945. That's the mental health for children. And as a result of COVID, and we've all been dealing with it, obviously, because we're here virtually, I didn't want to leave anything. I wanted to be able to still provide a service to the constituents of the district. So since beginning of April, I've hosted nearly 10 Zoom webinar or town halls, focusing on mental health, focusing on small business, the impact of COVID on small businesses, as well as suicide prevention and racial injustice, and education. I just hosted 2 events last week, one with on education, one with Erica Whitfield, school board member, and with the chief of staff, Ed Tierney, for the school district. And I also hosted a mental health town hall with a mental health professional at FAU, and Kathy Moore. She's the director for the Florida Mental Health Institute based at USF in Tampa. And so I just wanted to, you told me that no one else has given or provided a legislative update since session ended nearly 3 months ago, or nearly 4 months ago. I find that very disturbing, and not disturbing, but it's unfortunate, because I think all legislators should make themselves available to the district and their constituency. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I continue to do these Zoom town halls. So it's an honor to be here today. Thank you very much for giving me the time to give you this legislative update, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your being here, and yeah, we're really glad to see your face at one of our virtual meetings. I want to just talk with you a little bit about, you and I shared a conversation recently in reference to helping out with some of our COVID-19 events that we're having right now for testing. And I just want to let you know that I spoke with staff, and we're going to be reaching out to you shortly about that. But I'm so very grateful. This is someone, my fellow commissioners, who's been stepping up and calling and checking in on a regular basis to see if we need anything. And I'm very grateful for that. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Just a really quick question. Is Lake Worth Beach in need of any protective face masks? Because I actually got a call today from somebody who's looking to donate like 5,000 medical grade masks. I don't know if Lake Worth Beach needs.
We'll take them.
We'll
take anything anyone's willing to do. We've been working. I know the Vice Mayor Pro Tem too, and the Vice Mayor have all been working very hard with the feeding programs, and also with the handing out and distributing supplies to people in some of our areas of the community that really need it. And we're looking to provide that at testing sites and food distribution sites around, because I got a call from Miss Reggie from For the Children, and she was like, we need stuff. We're running out of masks. We're running out of things. Are these portable? We'll take anything, but if they're portable or washable, one of the big things that they were saying is, if they're going to run out, can we have the ones that we can wash? I don't know if that's possible or not, but it's just something to think of. And like I said, we'll take anything, and we're very grateful for anything.
Okay, I'll talk to my legislative staff to connect you with the individuals who want to donate the masks. I believe the masks are one-time use masks, but don't quote me on that. I'm 100% sure.
No, that's fine. We'll still take them. Trust me. But we're very grateful. I have some questions here from some of my other fellow commissioners. First up, Commissioner Hardy, followed by the Vice Mayor, and then Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Hardy, are you unmuted?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Silver, for, first of all, appearing in our meeting. We appreciate that. We appreciate the update. And also we appreciate the work that you've done, not just this legislative session, but as you said, over the past several legislative sessions on mental health. especially mental health for children in particular. The various changes that you made to the Baker Act process and to the accountability and protocols. As a former classroom educator, I certainly appreciate that. On the subject of some of the things that you talked about, which were huge wins, teacher raises, the first time since 2003 that the Sadowski Fund for Affordable Housing has not been swept. There are some folks who expect there to be, at a later date, some sort of a special session when we get some more transparency as to what the real budget is going to be, given that revenue is probably going to be different than what it was estimated during the session. And there are a lot of folks who are fearful that some of these big wins, teacher raises, the Sadowski Trust Fund for Affordable Housing not being rated this year, may be on the chopping block. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, and how you would how you would approach that, and how you would what you can tell folks here in the city who might be concerned about those priorities being gored.
Okay, thank you for that. How I look at it, I'm hoping that it's not cut completely. I just have to, if you think about it, try to look at it objectively. If the budget's going to be reduced by, say, from what I'm hearing, it's going to be closer to about 3 to 5% reduction in the budget, which to me is kind of shockingly low. I thought it would be much higher, but maybe we have enough in reserves to make up for a lot of the shortfalls. But that being said, I would think maybe everything across the board is reduced by 5% or 3%. Everything from the Sadowski Fund 3% or 5% reduction to maybe a member project that is $50,000. Maybe that is reduced by 3 to 5%. So do you see what I'm talking about?
Right. And I totally get you there. And those are on the expenditure side of things. On the tax expenditure side of things, do you think that there'll be an opportunity to roll back some of the tax cuts that we saw go through this legislative session? I get that that's procedurally difficult because it requires a supermajority to raise taxes. Now, unfortunately, you can cut taxes with a simple majority. You need a supermajority to raise them. Do you think there'll be any appetite to make up for these budget shortfalls without cutting the programs and some of the priorities that folks around the state have been longing for years?
Not cutting at all? Or you're saying not cutting?
Not cutting at all, hopefully, right? I mean, if we can find revenue as opposed to cutting some of these really critical things like education and affordable housing.
I don't want to see it cut. I'm sure you don't want to see it cut. I'm sure nobody on this commission wants to see it cut. But to be honest with you, I'm not part of those negotiations. I'm not part of the, unfortunately, we're not the party in power, and they don't have those conversations or those negotiations with us right now. I would have thought, to be honest with you, I thought there would have been a special by now, but because our fiscal year starts in 2 weeks.
Right.
So do we go ahead with does the governor sign the budget? Is the governor just going to cut 3% of the budget, and he could be cutting out entire projects just to get the 3%? Or does he speak to the speaker and the Senate president, hey, we're just going to cut across the board, everything 3% or 5%? I don't know. My hope is that entire projects or entire, I guess, I don't know if you want to call the $450 million for teacher raises a project, but that expenditure, I don't want to see that cut completely. With a $3 billion shortfall, that could get completely cut if you think about it, because that's not $3 billion. That has to make up the $3 billion. But I would hope that it would just be a percentage. That's my hope, but I'm not privy to those meetings, those conversations.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
You're welcome.
Vice
Thank
Mayor?
you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. David, I wanted to thank you again. You've been a great friend to the city of Lake Worth Beach, and thank you for your calls on a regular basis, checking in, seeing if there's anything you can do for us and our citizens. I want to thank you tonight because I know that you've been working with Jess and the mayor and me over and over for a while, looking at internet access for our city. And I know that's coming closer to being something that we could look at. I think we're having those conversations on Thursday night. So I want to thank you for being part of that and helping us. I go back 10 years when I sat on the CRA, we were working on this project. So with you there in the house and your fellow friends that you were able to reach out to and help us, and Erica Whitfield at the school board, it was the right timing. So I'm hoping that continues to move forward, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, the digital divide is something that is affecting so many children in our state, whether not just Palm Beach County, but obviously I represent a portion of Palm Beach County. And last week when I had the Zoom webinar with Erica Whitfield, school board member Whitfield, and Ed Tierney, chief of staff, I brought that issue up. I've talked to Joel Flores, the mayor of Green Acres, telling me in certain areas, Green Acres, the children have no access to internet. There's not even, you can't even flip a switch and turn on the internet if Comcast or Xfinity or AT&T want to go in and provide it for free, because there's just no infrastructure in those areas. So I've asked them about mobile hotspots, and unfortunately, what I'm hearing from the providers is that the mobile hotspots wouldn't really work currently in the current technology, but supposedly in, I think, St. Lucie County or Martin County, where they've used certain school buses that have hotspots, I guess, attached to them or on them in certain areas to provide a mobile Wi-Fi to certain areas of Martin County. Now, Martin County, and I think it is Martin County. Martin County is nowhere near as dense as Palm Beach County. So I don't know if you were to, let's just say we find a cluster area where the school children just do not have access to internet. If you put a school bus that's a Wi-Fi hotspot, maybe you could provide internet for, let's just use round numbers, for 100 school-age children, but now you have 1,000 school-age children at one time trying to use it. Would it still work? I don't know. That's not my expertise, but it is something that I'm continually working on with the providers, whether it's AT&T or Comcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Robinson.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and your initiatives for human services, greatly appreciated. I can understand your frustrations in lack of communication. Do you have any sense of what the governor is going to not sign?
What he's not going to sign? I don't think he's going to not sign a lot of bills, just because if a bill gets to his desk, that bill has gone through a legislature. Both chambers of the legislature are controlled by the same party that he is. So they've been vetted quite a bit from not one chamber, but two chambers, and committee staff, two silos from two different chambers. So my hope is that he doesn't veto any good bills.
Do you get a sense of cooperation with the virus war that we're having?
I'm sorry. There was one thing I
You
wanted to
have a
ask.
sense of cooperation between the parties?
Oh, because of COVID?
Yes.
Yes and no. I mean, I've got my friends in the legislature on both sides of the aisle. We're all concerned, but unfortunately, it seems as though it has become somewhat partisan. People's reaction and whether or not I do see some cooperation.
Good.
But I do want to go back to one thing that you mentioned before. If the governor is going to sign everything that goes before his desk, and I said yes initially, but now that I'm thinking about it, last year the governor surprisingly vetoed a bill that was an anti-home rule bill. Sorry. Do you remember the bill that passed the House, passed the Senate? It would ban cities from being able to ban plastic straws. Do you remember that bill?
Yes.
And the governor vetoed that. That was kind of a shock, because like I mentioned before, these are bills that are going through both chambers that are controlled by the same parties as he is. So will he veto any bills? I don't know.
Do you expect the Gulfstream energy initiative to go forward at any pace?
Can you explain to me a little bit more about Gulfstream Energy?
The interest in using the Gulfstream energy.
Oh, you're talking about the water. Are you talking about the water power?
Yes.
The Lake Worth project.
Yeah, like what project? I'm sorry. So what do I support it, or what was that? I'm sorry.
Well, do you expect it to go anywhere?
Sure. Why not? I mean, I think it's clean energy. It's renewable.
But
I think it's great. I think
the state legislature has not moved it forward. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It was, I think it's appropriation of, what was the appropriation? 2.5 million?
Yes,
Okay. Right now,
it's dead in the water. Or
no,
the
no pun
drawstring.
intended.
No pun intended. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Don't be
One
funny.
last question. Is there any work being done on voting districts? I mean, the census, it's census year. When does that work on setting up the districts start? Gerrymandering.
Okay, so you're talking about redrawing of the districts.
Yes.
Okay, that's not the census. That's more of what the legislature is going to do in
But
20.
it occurs every census year.
Right, that's the 2021, I believe during the 2021 legislative years when we'll be redrawing the House and the Senate and the congressional seats.
And there's nothing being done to this point.
Not right now, because right
Okay.
now is an election. Right now, we're in the middle of an election year. And those individuals, let's just say you're an individual that could be a part of that process in redrawing the maps. Well, what if you don't win re-election? So you don't actually go through that until after the election process. So it'll be occurring in 2021.
Any chance of it being nonpartisan? Just, having a separate citizen involvement rather than politicians?
I don't believe so. I believe
No.
the way it's written, and I think in statute, it has to be the party. I think it's the party in power that draws them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
See you in Lake Worth.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Good thing we're nonpartisan here in our elections in the city of
Nope.
Lake Beach. We don't have to play party politics here. One of the great things about being local leaders.
Exactly. Commissioner Maxwell, do you have a question?
I'm sorry. Nope, I don't have any hands up.
No?
Oh, we're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're gonna have you. We'll have you back
Thank
soon.
you.
Okay.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
Really?
again. All right, folks, then let's move on to commission liaison reports and comments. We've got a big agenda and lots of public comments. So you guys want to take a quick run at it? Let's start with Commissioner Robinson.
Well, it's the beginning of the summer and we're all going to have to get used to different activities from our normal breaks in school. And I hope everybody wears their masks and has already filled out their census. I want to bring emphasis to Gay Pride Month and hope everybody really takes this virus seriously and stays safe. That's it. And I'm probably going to say that our public input tonight might take longer than our own input. So who knows?
Probably, yeah. Commissioner Hardy?
Thank you. Last week, Commissioner Robinson and I had a discussion in the sunshine about race relations. I think, broadly in the city, police reform, PBSO's contract, some of the things that we would like to see changed and reformed here in the city. I think we're going to have a discussion that doesn't delve into the substance of those issues, given the way that the agenda item is written. But at a later date, we should, or a task force should, discuss these things at length. And I appreciate Commissioner Robinson for agreeing to the meeting, and I appreciate the members of the public who took part in the meeting. And I can tell you that there is interest on my part and on Commissioner Robinson's part, and on the part of elected officials around the county, to have uncomfortable conversations about what must be done to achieve racial equity in the communities where we live. Some of you know that I'm the second vice president of the Caucus of Black Elected Officials, and this is priority number one for us. We had a meeting last week with Virginia Baker discussing some of the things that we would like to see change. And I hope no matter what happens later on in this meeting, as far as the item about a special meeting to talk about a task force. I hope that there's an appetite for all of us to get uncomfortable around these issues, because our discomfort will be the indication that we're probably in the right place and doing the right things. And so, there's that. The other thing was that, there was discussion last week, and, I just want to clear some things up. And I can't speak for others, but there was talk last week about an additional special meeting. And folks are saying different things. What I can tell you is, Commissioner Robinson and I, we were scheduling our meeting for that Monday evening. And when I was called on the phone and asked whether I would want to have a special meeting, even if it would be at the same time, and we would have to have our special, the meeting with Commissioner Robinson and I at a different time, I was a yes. And I just want to be really clear about that. If one of my colleagues wants to have a discussion about this issue, I will put things I want to do aside to have that conversation, because I believe it's that important. So I look forward to what will happen later on in this meeting, and hopefully we can make some movement on this and make some movement on this quickly. And by the way, I also had a meeting with Colonel Arroyo and Major Keene about these topics of reform last week as well. And it was a productive and informative conversation, and I intend to have several more with folks from PBSO.
Thank you, Commissioner Maxwell. Gonna unmute. You're not unmuted.
All these things I have to do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just two things this evening. First of all, I'm not sure if each of you are aware, but Patrick Livingston of the Arms of Hope community down in the Osborne Center has recently been honored with the award from the Palm Beach Illustrated Palm Beach's Local Heroes Award. And while I don't have all the details on as to what the criteria was for that award, I do know that it was very competitive, and there were a lot of worthy people that were considered. And I'm just wondering if we might want to, as a commission, consider a resolution or proclamation in honor of Patrick and the good work he does in the Osborne community. So if nobody objects, maybe we could ask the city manager to get with the city clerk, and maybe we could start working on a proclamation or something in honor of Patrick Livingston's very, very good work in the community. So is everybody okay with that?
Great.
All right.
Awesome.
The other thing, Madam Mayor, is this. There's increased conversation in the media about the coronavirus and how many states are experiencing an uptick in cases. And there's great debate, depending on who you listen to, as to what the cause for that is, whether it's additional testing or, people are not socially distancing, whatever the case may be. That being said, Palm Beach County is kind of sticking out like a sore thumb here in the state, from what I understand, as far as being part of that conversation. And more specifically, the media has pointed to Lake Worth Beach and a couple of other communities here in Palm Beach County. And I just want to remind everybody how very important it is that each of us do the very best we can to educate folks and talk to folks and encourage folks to do the right things. And I know personal responsibility is something we all have mentioned in the past, but to work on the social distancing, the wearing of masks, personal hand sanitation, all of those things, because if we're going to get this thing under control and really, be able to open up our city and experience the economic resurgence that we desperately need, we all need to be in this together. So I've been talking to the city manager about what some of the things we can do. And I'm hoping that we're going to have a plan to do something similar to what I've done in the past. And I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but I personally distributed during the early in the Corona event, pamphlets in 3 languages that basically explained what was happening and what we needed to do as individuals and as a community to get through this. And, you know, we really did, I think, a nice job. We basically touched virtually every home, I think, for the most part, in the city of Lake Worth Beach. So we may have to do that again. We may have to take a different approach, maybe, you know, a different way of communicating, you know, in the written form. But we really do need to see what we can do to get folks to really take this very, very serious, because it's a very serious thing. And I just feel awful if the media is going to look at Lake Worth Beach, or I felt like we haven't done everything we possibly can do to minimize the impact of this really, really terrible pandemic. So that's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tomorrow is the 2020 census call to action. It'll start with a press conference and working with Commissioner Christina Lambert, we've pulled together the larger cities, and we're working on like a friendly competition. We're going to, you know, try to get our numbers up and make that happen. So look forward to some of that coming out of our group to try to get our numbers up. Feeding South Florida, we're continuously doing our Tuesday feeding, excuse me, at the CRA. With the city, CRA, and Feeding South Florida, we have at least 700 families coming through. That is a drive up. If anybody is looking for food 5 days a week, Patrick at Wingfield and 12th Avenue South, that's a walk up or a drive up. You can get prepared meals there. Also, I'm delivering prepared meals on Friday and Saturday now. 500 meals to seniors. We send some over to Patrick. Those meals are like a gourmet TV dinner being done by Grotto Restaurant and the organization Buchan. So if there's anybody in need out there in any of your districts, please let me know and we'll make arrangements to get them food. This week via Zoom, I was sworn in as the first vice president for the Palm Beach County League of Cities. And also I will be the chair of the legislative committee this year on behalf of the Palm Beach County League of Cities. So that's all I've got, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're going to have a press conference tomorrow morning out at Bryant Park. Just a few people, but just spreading the word. I think it's a great idea that Commissioner Lambert came up with for us to really encourage people to get involved with the census. But I think, guys, as usual, we're going to be the underdogs because I think our numbers are lower, and it's not based on, because in some of these cities like West Palm is a lot bigger than us. It'll be based on a percentage, so that the percentage of our population as opposed to their population. So we have a chance, but we're going to have to get pretty creative. So expect some fun stuff to hit your email boxes in social media sites in the next coming weeks. But we got to pick our numbers up. Also, TPA meeting I have is this Thursday. They're still doing half virtual conference, half in person. I will be attending virtually on Thursday. We also received a lot of information, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit further on, but I attended a virtual meeting with the U.S. Conference of Mayors on Friday, I believe it was, first thing in the morning. And then I also attended a meeting, I'm sorry, that was Thursday. Then I attended a meeting on Friday with Congresswoman Lois Frankel and Senator Lori Berman and Commissioner Melissa McKinley and other female leaders throughout our county in reference to everything that we're dealing with right now, especially, of course, the deaths that are going out and the injustice. A lot of women giving their heartfelt stories about living with this type of injustice and how they feel every day and worrying about their children and coming up with some really good ideas and innovative ideas on how we can actually make a change. I knew I was having this meeting, and I knew I was going to be meeting with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, who was predicted to have some sort of resolution in place because Chicago Mayor Lightfoot had been very involved in previous incidences and had created some legislation similar to the Obama.org that they were taking up in reference to incidents back a few years ago. And they did not do that, but they put their own working group together. And on that conference, we're talking about what they were going to be doing. I did call for a special meeting. I called for Friday, and then I called for either Monday or Thursday of the following week. I, as mayor, can call an emergency meeting anytime I want to. It is part of the rules and regulations, but come on, folks, given what's been going on and some of the tone in our commission meetings lately, if I would have called a special meeting, I wouldn't have called for consensus from each and every one of you to have it. That would have been seen in another way, and it would have been some other contentious argument. I did hear, however, that Commissioner Robinson was putting together some of his ideas, and he would have them ready for the meeting today. So we're here. I'm glad we're here. I'm glad that we're all going to be talking about this together, and big issues hit, come on. Some of us, we've all been together since some of the biggest injustices from Orlando to Trayvon to George to today now, or yesterday. We've all been together through a lot of this stuff. We've been together through, we can't forget to stay together and to talk. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for all of us. But the way we improve is by putting different minds together and by trying to solve the issues together. But we got to do it together. And you're right, Commissioner Hardy, we do have to talk about the tough stuff. But you know what, guys, let's just talk about it for what it is. I mean, I'm just so tired of talking partisan politics and who did this one and who did. Let's focus on how we feel, what we want to do about it. What can we do about it? What changes can be made? And let's not paint broad strokes on things. Let's be real and have these conversations. It's not who called the meeting first or who called the meeting second. I mean, really? Come on. These are big topics that we're talking about. Real people are involved. All right. So let's move on with our meeting. We're going to start with our public participation of non-agenda items and consent agenda items. And Ms. Clerk, I do believe you have a long list and your voice is going to be very hoarse tonight.
Madam Mayor, there are no items that are not on the consent. That are not on the agenda. All the cards I have are for agenda items.
Okay.
So I've moved them to that. So if anyone put it in and said public participation of non-agenda, I haven't forgotten you. I will read it, but at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
All right, and we've got the consent agenda. And remember that the city clerk had changed, what was it in the?
The
was it item A?
resolution 19, it was going to have a public hearing on July 7th. That public hearing has been moved to July 21st, and we will be advertising it.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're going to move on to our public hearing. This is ordinance number 2020-07. This is a second reading. We've already done the presentation and on the first meeting, but City Attorney, you do need to read the ordinance, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Ordinance 2020-07, an ordinance of the City of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 23, Land Development Regulations by amending Article 1, General Provisions, Division 2, Definitions, Section 23.1-12, Definitions, Article 2, Site Design Qualitative Standards, Section 23.2-31, Site Design Qualitative Standards, Article 3, Zoning Districts, Division 3, Mixed Use Districts, Section 23.3-18, MU-W, Mixed Use West, Article 3, Zoning Districts, Division 6, Plan Development, Section 23.3-25, Plan Development District, Article 4, Development Standards, Section 23.4-10, Off-Street Parking, and Section 23.4-13, Administrative Uses and Conditional Uses, and Article 5, Supplemental Regulations, Division 3, Nonconformities, Section 23.5-3, Nonconformities of the city's Code of Ordinances, and providing for severability, the repeal of laws in conflict, codification, and an effective date.
I'll entertain a motion. Vice Mayor, is that your hand for a motion?
Yes, so moved.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Okay, yeah, second.
Second, okay. Are there any
Madam Mayor, for
other
the record, it's William Waters. I found a Scrivener's error this afternoon on line 713. there are 4 words showing they are stricken out, and they actually should not be, and those words are shall not be granted. That's the actual words. So if the motion could include those 4 words not being stricken, but being kept within the ordinance, I would appreciate it.
So moved.
So moved. Vice Mayor Pro Tem, you second that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment cards? City Clerk?
Not on this item, Madam Mayor.
Okay, seeing there are none, all those in favor state so by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Hardy, did you vote?
I voted aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item B, authorization of grant applications to Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, funding of critical facility hardening projects in impacted communities, and invitation of public comment. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. Anyone have any comments?
I'm sorry, who seconded the motion? Okay, thank you.
Is there any presentation or anything on this? Or was it going to be used for hardening projects?
Madam Mayor, Brian Shields, I believe, is on the call, is our engineer and water utilities director who is heading this project up. If you have any questions regarding any of the specific grant requests.
Okay, can you just, I know we have it in the backup, but can you, anything you wanted to add to it, Brian, just considering that we're
Yes,
going after this grant?
yeah, good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Brian Shields here, Water Utility Director. Yeah, this evening is authorization for us to go ahead through our grant consultant and submit the applications on June 30th. This gives us a 2-week public notice period where we're noticed in the Lake Worth Herald and on the city's website to invite public comment, if any, on these 4 projects that we're submitting for funding, 100% funding through Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, FDEO. And these are for critical facilities necessary for public health and safety. So they include the water treatment plant, the hurricane hardening program, the water treatment plant re-roof facility, electrical system operations move from their current location into the city's EOC, and fire station number 2 roof and emergency communications upgrades.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a motion on the floor in a second. Are there any public comment cards? City Clerk?
Madam Mayor, I apologize for that noise that you just heard. Well, that wasn't noise, it was a resident. But there's a voicemail but I don't know what the voicemail says because I don't know if it's about this item, but I just received this at 6:44. So I haven't had time to hear what this says. So I don't know if it's about this item, but I have not gotten any written communications about this item.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion on the floor, then a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're going to move on to unfinished business. This is item A, rent deferral amendment to the casino tenants leases for COVID-19 closures and authorization to city manager to sign the amendments. I'll entertain a motion. First, I need a motion in a second.
So moved.
Moved. Who's that moved? Commissioner Maxwell and Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. City Manager?
Madam Mayor and Commission, this item is actually the result of a couple of presentations and discussions that we've had regarding how to address some of the closures at the beach that have occurred at the casino building and how we would address the tenants' leases up there. Over the 2 meetings that we did have, it became clear that some of the recommendations and ideas that staff brought forward were things that the commission really wasn't interested in. Instead, what we understood was the commission was interested in considering deferrals of rent, not abatements. Based on the approval of the Benny's lease amendments, the language that was contained in there regarding that deferral program is now being suggested to apply to Kilwins, Lake Worth Keys, and Mamma Mia's as the remaining tenants of the casino as being the affected parties as part of that overall group. So basically, the deferral amounts would match the percentage of closures that have occurred since March 20th, and up to and would include up to the end of this year at December 30th of this year. And basically, they would have a 1-year period in which to pay that pro rata percentage back to the city. Things such as common area maintenance, utilities, and taxes would not be affected. That would still be due. But this addresses basically their lease amounts and any patio leases. So that percentage would actually be deferred, and they would have the ability to pay it back over the period of a year. If there's any questions, Madam Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, City Manager, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I see that the tenants, when did they all stop paying their rent at the same time? Or are they all different?
They
I don't see.
Mama Mia's paid for May. I'm sorry, they paid for April. The others stopped paying Killen's and Lake Ortiz at the end of March. So they haven't paid their rent that's due at this point.
And those are the rents showed, the 13,000, the 17,000, and the 20,000, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, that's the unpaid amounts, correct? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
I just wanted to know, we weren't privy to the real negotiations that went on, how the response was for abatement for the businesses that were absolutely out of business. You know, I haven't heard from any of the tenants, and that includes the beach club as well, in reference to this negotiations. Our tenants are understanding of their responsibilities and ours.
City Manager?
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Robinson, over the period of the 2 times I brought this item forward, I was in communication with the various tenants. They obviously were very much in favor of receiving some abatements. That was something that I did not get direction from y'all to proceed with. So we stuck to the discussion on deferrals. I believe one of the tenants has a card in, Madam Clerk, that may be read in later to kind of give you firsthand their belief on what they would like. But during the negotiations, discussions that we had, sure, they would love to have abatement. But that wasn't something that I got direction from the commission to proceed with in the discussions.
Did we have a vote on that direction,
No,
or
sir. No,
it
sir.
was just one-on-one by phone?
No, I had presentations at your commission meeting twice on this particular item, because remember, we were talking about the issue of not only these leases, but also Benny's, and the Mulligan's discussion was also tangled in that as well. But during those 2 meetings, abatement was something that at least the majority of the commission wasn't interested in providing. So we didn't bring that to the table at that point.
Yeah, I came to the meeting, Commissioner Robinson. He said he was going to bring something back. I guess nobody talked about abatement at that meeting, so he didn't bring back abatement. But I would say, I have a question for you, City Manager.
Yes, ma'am.
Which of the businesses reopened at first? Well,
The way we were able to work with the businesses and the county on the closure of the beach facility, because you remember there was a period of time when
I know the answer to this question. I'm just asking you to say.
Lake Ortiz actually completely shut down because they are strictly commercial. So they didn't fall in under any of the restrictions the governor allowed for the restaurants to be open to maintain takeout and delivery services. I think Mama Mia's and Killen's had a few days there where they were trying to figure out how to do some of those activities and work with the city. But
they were able to do takeout and delivery at both Mama Mia's and,
yes, ma'am,
and Killen's. Okay. What about the t-shirt company? Obviously retail just opened, so we know that they were not open. And what about the beach club?
The beach club, in discussions with them, they did not ask for any deferrals or abatements.
No, I'm saying, were they allowed to open?
They were, but they chose to close down. We had come up with a plan to try to keep them open for deliveries, and It was my understanding that they decided just to go ahead and close for a period of time. So
At
they
the
had
golf
the ability to do takeout and deliveries, but they didn't for a period of time.
Oh, I just wanted, because I saw the gate up there
Mhm.
on the
Well,
golf course.
there was no reason to
Get in.
have them have it open if they weren't going to be operating from staff's perspective.
All right. I was under the impression that the gate was closed because the park was closed, which is the golf course.
Correct, but if they had stayed open, we would have, just as we did with the beach, and since they were a commercial operation, figured out a way to allow them to do takeout and deliveries,
Okay.
not have people go into the park itself.
No, I'm all for deferment. If they're all interested in deferment, I think that's, that's fine with me. But I just think that it seems like at least the t-shirt company, and even the golf course for that matter, because the gates were closed. I didn't realize that you had come up with a plan to open them up so that they could do takeout. I didn't know that had been in the works. I was just saying, for people that couldn't open up, I think is a little bit different story than people that were able to open up. Okay. Commissioner Robinson?
Well, I agree with you, Madam Mayor, and I understood it, and for the public, whether they understand or not, the beach club is a concession, not a tenant.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that maybe made a difference in negotiations, but I don't know if we're interested in amending the proposal to at least give the t-shirt company 1 month's abatement. Not talking about the CAM, but just an abatement in the rent for 1 month. If there's any sense of that being a motion, I would be interested in making that motion.
And I'd be supportive of it.
I second it.
Yeah.
Well, I can't make the motion.
There's,
I believe
I
Commissioner.
make okay. Go
Okay,
ahead.
you have to make a motion. Go ahead,
Well,
Commissioner
there's a
Robinson.
motion on the floor in a second. You'd have to amend it.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so we've got to wait to see. The original motion was made by Vice Mayor,
Commissioner Maxwell,
Commissioner Maxwell. Okay, Vice Mayor Pro Tem.
seconded by Vice Mayor.
Did you have anything, Commissioner Maxwell? Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
Can you hear me, Madam Mayor?
Now I can, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it is wise to start making exceptions because then if we start doing that, we may find ourselves having conversations with others about similar arrangements. So if we're going to be consistent and fair, we need to be consistent and fair. So I'm not interested in changing my motion.
Okay. Commissioner Hardy?
I'll make a motion, which will be a subsidiary motion to amend the motion on the floor to approve. Yeah, so the motion on the floor is to approve what's been presented. I'm making a motion to amend that so that Lake Worth Tees is given a 1 month abatement. And I'm looking for a second for that motion.
I'll
The
second
attorney?
that.
Okay. You seconded it, Vice Mayor? City Attorney? Is she still here? City Attorney?
I'm here.
Hi. How does that work, the secondary motion now? We had a motion on the floor in a second. It wasn't voted on.
So you should vote on the addition before you vote on the regular motion. So
The first motion.
right, he wants to add, Commissioner Hardy wants to have a second motion to add Lake Worth Tees. So you need to vote on that first, and then you'll vote on the original motion. So you have two motions to vote on right now.
Okay.
But
So
I
you
have
gotta-
public comment.
We have public comment. We still have to go through that. I can't take a vote until we have public comment.
Right.
Correct.
I just have one comment that Barry Friedman had sent in from the June 2nd meeting, and then this was continued. That's why it's under unfinished business.
Okay.
To the Honorable Mayor Petrillo and Commissioners, Ray, the Lake Worth Beach T-shirt Company. Being a 35-year tenant at our beloved beach, I am very worried. I have commitments I cannot fulfill. This has never happened to me in my entire working life of 50 years since I was 20 years old. I have commitments to the city, to my employees, and to my vendors. How do you expect me to honor these commitments without the means to fulfill those commitments that were taken away from me on March 19th, during the busiest time of the year? How can you look past this without lending a hand? With my personal resources, I have struggled to pay my employees. My vendors have been totally understanding and are supporting me completely. I now look to you for your assistance as commissioners and landlords. I was totally shut down with zero cash flow. I am in a different situation compared with the other businesses up here. I have lost a significant part of my yearly revenue stream, almost 40%. What I need to continue as a viable tenant is a 50% abatement for April and May, just the base rent. I will pay complete CAM for those months. I ask you to put June's rent on the end of my option on October 31st, 2020. I will resume my regular payments on July 1st. Clearly, the economic assistance I am requesting is minimal. While it doesn't completely relieve my financial burdens, it may be enough to allow me to continue as a successful tenant. I believe this is the best answer for all parties concerned. Respectfully, Barry S. Friedman, Lake Worth Beach T-shirt Company.
Okay. So we've got the subsidiary motion now. How does that relate to what City Manager, Mr. Friedman, has asked for? He asked for 50% reductions for
Yeah.
2 months.
Madam Mayor, just, and this may be some clarification that we need. If you do the deferral program on the period where they had 50 or more % closures as part of the governor's order, he would already be deferring that amount of rent. If I understand the motion is y'all just basically want to take one of those months and completely remove it from the ledger as anything. Okay.
And he was asking for 50%.
Right. Well, he's asking for 50%,
Twice.
which is
Twice.
basically, I think, the same thing. It just happens in 1 month.
Right.
So may I be more specific in the
Commissioner
motion?
Hart? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'll be more specific in the motion. So basically, what I'm looking for here is a 100% abatement of rent for April, and a deferral of May and June rent in accordance with the rest of this document that we've been given. So that's the motion.
Seconded.
And seconded. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye. Aye.
All right.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
With that said, now the original motion, Pam.
Yes.
The original motion was to approve all the other items on that, excluding that subsidiary motion.
Been amended.
Well, it's just to approve the motion, which you already made that motion a part of this motion. So you just basically approving the motion that's already been
Would
articulated.
apply to the other two.
Correct.
So we don't have to make another motion.
You need to vote again because
Okay.
Because we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Yes.
All those in favor state so by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Good luck to you, Mr. Friedman, and to everyone up there at the beach. I understand what it's like to be a small business owner when you can't open your doors. So wishing you much love. All right, let's move on to new business. Appeal of the Historic Resources Preservation Board decision. This is quasi judicial. Hold on, I need my handy dandy quasi judicial scripts here so I don't mess anything up. All right. Hold on 1 second. Okay. This is the appeal of the Historic Resources Preservation Board's decision to approve the construction of a new single-family structure at 403 South M Street. And this is a quasi-judicial hearing. The title of the case has been read into the record. This is an appeal by Dan Waleski on behalf of Royal Building Group, LLC, appealing the decision of the Historic Resources Preservation Board approving the construction of a new single-family structure with conditions at 403 South M Street. It's quasi-judicial, as I mentioned before. It's a hearing to hear an appeal pursuant to section 23.2-17 of the city's code of ordinances. Under the city's code, the commissioners will consider only the evidence presented at the HRPB meeting. There will be no new evidence presented. Instead, the city and the applicant will be given up to 10 minutes to make a presentation, which should essentially be an overview of what occurred at the Historic Resources Preservation Board's level. The commission can then ask questions or seek clarification on anything that was covered brought up, or relied upon at the HRPB meeting. The public will also be given an opportunity to speak. Finally, as indicated in the materials, it takes a super majority vote of the commission to overturn the HRPB's decision. Any questions on this procedure? Okay. Do the commissioners have any ex parte communications, personal investigations, or campaign contributions to disclose? Commissioner
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes, I talked to the appellant or the person appealing, Waleski.
Okay, I do not. Commissioner Hardy? No. Commissioner Maxwell?
I spoke with a member of the public, but I've not met the individual that is trying to build the home.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I too have spoken to a third party, but not the builder. I am familiar with some of the HRPB meetings.
Okay. I heard from a resident about it, but I don't know anything about the case from HRPB other than what was provided in the backup. All right. Let's see. Then we're going to go do all those giving testimony. At this point, I need you to stand, raise your right hand, face the city clerk, and be sworn in.
You don't have to stand.
You don't have to stand.
Sit comfortably, raise your right hand.
Is Daniel Walensky also taking this oath?
Let's allow
He's-
capabilities. So let me see here.
I just want to do it once if we can.
Yeah.
Oh, he's
Yeah.
I am here. I don't have video.
okay. That's fine. Do you swear or affirm that in this proceeding you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
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 Okay. As you testify, state your name and address for the record.
Okay, we're going to get started here. I'm going to ask the Director for Community Sustainability or a designee to give the departmental presentation, which can be no longer than 10 minutes, all right?
Okay, William Waters, Community Sustainability Director. I want to introduce Abraham Fogel, our Historic Preservation Planner. He'll be giving the presentation of what information was presented to the Historic Resource Preservation Board in furtherance of this case. And so he'll take it away, and here is his presentation. Thanks.
Thanks. Welcome, Abraham.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight, I will be providing the staff presentation for item A, appeal of the Historic Resources Preservation Board's decision to approve the construction of a new single-family structure at 403 South M Street. On the left is the location map of the property. The subject property is outlined in red. It's located on the west side of South M Street between 4th Avenue South and 5th Avenue South. On the right is a photo of the property, which is currently vacant. In summary, at the February 12, 2020 HRPB regular meeting, the board voted unanimously to approve a new single-family residence at 403 South M Street with conditions of approval. The conditions of approval included the initial staff recommended conditions, as well as modifications to conditions 7 and 8, which were amended by the board at the meeting. The applicant, Dan Waleski, on behalf of Royal Building Group LLC, is appealing the decision by the city's HRPB approving the construction of the new single-family structure. The applicant contends that the board's amended conditions 7 and 8 are arbitrary and are not supported by any historic context, code, or ordinance existing in the city of Lake Worth Beach. As stated in the staff report, the structure's design featured elements that were reminiscent of the masonry vernacular or minimal traditional architectural style, but lacked general features, massing, and detailing to make it of any discernible architectural style. The board determined that the proposed single-family residence did not represent a distinct architectural style and contained incompatible front yard side features. The board discussion focused on modification of the conditions 7 and 8 based on the neighborhood context in order to increase visual compatibility and compliance with the Historic Preservation Ordinance. So here we have a comparison of condition number 7 as it was initially listed in the staff report and as amended by the board at the February 12, 2020 meeting. So in the staff report, condition number 7 was compatibly sized windows shall be added to the north and south facades to avoid long expanses of blank facade. The board amendment said the front porch window and column configuration shall be changed to be symmetrical with 2 vertically oriented single hung windows with columns spaced evenly across. In the following slides, I'll provide in-depth discussion to show how those conclusions were made. So starting with condition 7 as listed in the staff report, the proposed elevations depicted long expanses of unbroken facades, particularly the north and south facades, which have very few windows. Neighboring historic structures utilize many windows at regular intervals for light and ventilation into the structure. In the staff report, staff recommended that the applicant add additional windows or details in order to avoid long expanses of blank facade. In this slide, you can see the elevations. The north and south are labeled as right and left. They're highlighted in red. And essentially this condition was requesting that additional windows be added to these side elevations. The board amended condition number 7 based on neighboring historic properties, which feature vertically proportioned windows. The porch column configuration was also changed to create symmetry in the front porch. Vertically proportioned windows and balanced front porches are prevalent within the Southeast Lucerne Local Historic District. On the left, the front elevation is shown as presented to the board on February 12, 2020 meeting. Based on the amended condition of approval, the existing window would be replaced by 2 smaller vertically oriented windows and 1 additional column would be added. On the right is the streetscape elevation. This is a required item for new construction items. It provides a preview of how the street will look after the new construction is built. Moving on to condition number 8. Here's another slide where we have a comparison of how the condition was written on the staff report and how it was amended by the board. In the staff report, condition number 8 said the driveway shall be reduced in size so that a walkway connecting the front door with the sidewalk can be added without going over the front yard impermeable surface provision. It was amended by the board at the February 12, 2020 HRPB meeting to say the driveway shall be reduced from 12 feet to 10 feet wide with flares at the sidewalk. So again, going into the condition discussion. As discussed in the staff report, the proposal included a forward-facing 1.5 car garage on the south end of the front elevation that takes up nearly half of the front facade.
I'm sorry, Abraham, excuse me. Is there any way for you, especially with these drawings, to use a pointer or anything like that, or a mouse?
Yes, let's see.
This Thursday?
Laser pointer. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So, yes. So I'll pause here. When we're seeing the south side of the front elevation, we're referring to this area, and that's where you see the driveway leading up to the garage. So integral car garages are found on masonry vernacular or masonry minimal traditional residences in the districts. But they are generally only 9 feet wide and are accompanied by other features that delineate these home styles, such as low slope hip roofs, recessed front porches, divided light windows, and balanced facades. The proposed driveway is 12.5 feet wide, which maxes out the impermeable surface provision for the front yard. In the staff report, staff recommended that the driveway be reduced in width so that a walkway connecting the house to the street could be included while maintaining an impermeable surface calculation under the allowable amount. So as I mentioned, here we have the site plan. We can see the driveway, and staff's condition was to reduce it and include a walkway that would connect the street to the front door. The board's amendment to the condition changed it to say the driveway shall be reduced from 12 feet to 10 feet wide with flares at the sidewalk. The board amended the condition to indicate the maximum driveway width allowed. The requirement to provide a walkway connecting the front door with the sidewalk was removed but highly encouraged by the board. Again, here we have the site plan shown. And typically with our historic districts, specifically with single family residences, they feature driveways that are 1 car wide that are about 9 to 10 feet. Here we just have a summary of the conditions. So in a nutshell, for number 7, the staff report condition focused on the north and south elevations, which are the side elevations. The board amended the condition to actually address the front elevation by altering the column and window configuration. For number 8, the staff report condition focused on reducing the driveway width and creating a walkway between the front porch and the street. And the board amended it to be more specific and indicate that the maximum width was actually 10 feet. And it did remove the requirement to have a walkway, but it was highly encouraged. In conclusion, at the February 12, 2020 HRPB meeting, the board determined that the proposed single-family residence did not represent a distinct architectural style and contained incompatible front yard site features. The board discussion focused on the modification of the conditions based on the neighborhood context in order to increase visual compatibility and compliance with the historic preservation ordinance. That concludes staff presentation of the item. The applicant, Mr. Waleski, is here with us. He has also prepared a presentation. Due to IT requirements, staff will be sharing his presentation while he is presenting. We would like to mention we had the opportunity to see the presentation, and it appears new exhibits are being introduced, which were not part of the record for the February 12, 2020 HRPB meeting. After the applicant presentation, we will defer to the city attorney about the procedures for presentations during an appeal. And lastly, we have all the backup available. So if you have any questions on the minutes, the staff reports that were part of the record, we are happy to do a screen share so we can all look at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, the applicant may now make its presentation, which can be no longer than 10 minutes.
All right. So let's open his presentation up.
He's muted.
Okay. So let's.
And Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yes, go ahead.
there will be some points where the presentation, and I should say this up front because I don't want you to digest the information that you're about to see as being applicable or allowed. I have reviewed the presentation as well, and I have reviewed the information that was submitted to HRPB. There is a lot of new information. It would be appropriate to ask Mr. Waleski as he's giving his presentation if it is new information or not. He and I did have a conversation about this yesterday, and it's my understanding that he removed some of the pictures, but not all of them. In the end, you will have to make a decision on whether or not to consider the information, but I will tell you that under your rules, it needs to be information that was presented to the HRPB. This is an appeal, not a recommendation. So the rules are slightly different.
I have a question.
Okay, yes, thank you. Commissioner Hardy?
When it comes to a slide that has information on it that is not a part of the record, which is the only thing that we're allowed to consider here according to our rules, can we, being as we are controlling the presentation, can we simply skip that slide? Or is there new information mingled with information that's a part of the record?
In some of the slides, the new information is commingled with some of the old information. So I would like to give I think it would be appropriate to give Mr. Waleski an opportunity to identify what's new information. And if not, I think it is appropriate for staff to also identify what's new information. We want to make sure that when you're hearing it, that you are taking it into consideration. We don't want to kill his entire presentation. I would argue that most of the presentation is new information, but in an effort to be fair, we want to give him an opportunity to at least make his presentation.
Well, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes, please follow up.
It's hard to not consider information that you've seen. And if the information is not allowed, and he knew that it was not allowed, and there was back and forth between he and staff, is it possible that we can simply postpone this until he can make his presentation comply with the demands of our rules? Because I don't think it's fair for him to ask us to see all this information that we're not supposed to consider and then decide on the basis of the record only. You know, and frankly, I don't want to allow in this situation what I wouldn't want to allow in a future situation.
May I speak briefly?
Sure, Mr. Waleski.
This is a question.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, you can't speak. You can't speak yet. I'm sorry, Mr. Waleski, because it's quasi judicial. I have to open it up the floor to you, and staff is asking questions. So hold on one sec. Pamela?
Yes.
Can he speak at this point? I don't want to go back and forth in the middle of a quasi judicial hearing.
Well, he hasn't started his presentation yet. So I think
I'm asking, do we have to let him start, given that he has, after being warned, put information that doesn't belong in there? And he's basically going to show us a bunch of stuff that we're not allowed to consider. And then our obligation is to disregard, as you say, most of his presentation. I don't think that's fair to us. I don't think that's fair to the process. I don't think that's fair to other people who come before this board or other boards who have to make their presentations within what our rules allow. And so I'm wondering if we have the ability to simply postpone this until he can make a presentation that complies with our rules and procedures.
Pamela?
I'm listening. Well, I think that Mr. Waleski will argue that some of the information was presented. And frankly, in just looking at his presentation, some of the pages are okay. You know, he is going to disagree with me. So I don't know who is the final decision maker.
We are.
We are, exactly.
Right. You are. So while I think staff would appreciate your allowing them to say what was presented or not, I think that it's probably better for you to make the decision yourselves. However, with each slide, if you would allow staff to comment on whether or not it was submitted, I think that would be appropriate as well.
Thank you.
With that said, though, does that adhere to the rules if you were allowed to make a comment? Because is that going to end up in debate, which is against what we're supposed to be doing?
Madam Attorney,
Go ahead.
if I might interrupt, in deference to Commissioner Hardy's request, we do have a special meeting scheduled for June 30th to hear the second reading of the Bohemian. That is the only item on the agenda. If there was a motion made to defer this case and to a date certain of the 30th, we could work, Pamela and myself, with Mr. Waleski to remove the items that are not part of the original record and bring this item back after the Bohemian meeting, public hearing on June 30th, 2 weeks from today.
We'll move.
Seconded.
Seconded. All those in favor state so by saying aye. I'm sorry, we have any public comment cards?
Quick comment.
Yes, we do, Madam Mayor. We have
Okay,
one.
let me go to the vice mayor first, and then we'll go to the public comment.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. Like I said at the beginning, I've seen a little bit about this. Pamela, my question or my comment would be, At this point, we have not heard anything about him going in front of the HRPB board prior to this and being approved. And then this is a second. Will we hear about some of that, or is that something we need to take into consideration?
And that's a very good point.
He went in front of
Yes,
this
it
board
is.
before and was approved. Now he is coming back to fight the second.
Right.
Do
He
we,
started over, and none of the information from the first hearing were submitted to the HRPB for the second hearing.
okay,
There were members of the HRPB who were different from the first time. He did not amend his approval. He started over.
okay,
So
and
all of that is irrelevant.
okay, and to play the devil's advocate, if I was approved the first time, I would probably think I'd be approved the second time. But he wasn't, so that's why we're here today. But we're not looking into any of that or taking any of that into consideration.
Absolutely not.
Okay,
He cannot bring that information in because it was not specifically discussed at the HRPB meeting.
okay,
Well, that's,
thank you.
Point of information.
hold on one second. I got hands up all around, but go ahead real quickly, Commissioner. Ray.
So public comment is for when official action is being taken. Voting on a motion to postpone, does that constitute official action? And if it does not, do we need to hear public comment about this matter at this time? Or can we, being as it may not constitute official action, simply hear it when it is heard again in the future?
You can wait to hear it at the appropriate time in the future.
And I would hope then that we would do that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good. Commissioner Maxwell?
I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Commissioner Hardy. This is way too much to ask of us to sift through information. You can't unring a bell, and this is very important. And Commissioner Amoroso raises a good point too, and that is there's a history here, that there was a prior approval, and it's going to get really convoluted, I think, if we don't ask Mr. Walensky to really work with staff and assure that his presentation is consistent with what we're trying to work with right now.
Okay.
May I
Commissioner
speak?
Robinson?
Yeah, I just like, I don't know how this vote is going to shake out, but can we have a definition of arbitrary and capricious? Because that's what it's about, between an applicant and staff, or an applicant and the board. I'm very concerned about the input for applicants. Without getting into detail, I'm astounded at the details of this conflict.
Okay, Commissioner Robinson, I'm going to stop you now because you're deliberating. You're giving.
That's what we're here to do.
No,
No,
you're not at this point. You are here in an appellate capacity, and we have to follow a specific appellate process.
Then
And
before I make a decision, I'd like, or if we're going to postpone this, but I think the public deserves to know what arbitrary and capricious is in reference to historic preservation.
And I think that should come back then when we hear it. Now, we have the motion in second,
Absolutely.
right? Did we have the motion in second?
Madam-
Hold on one second. Hold on. We have the
Madam
motion.
We have a motion to postpone until June 30th and a second.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the date was in there. That's what I was trying to get to. Commissioner Hardy?
So I'm the seconder on that motion, and now, if I can make a friendly amendment, if the motion maker is okay with it, I want to make sure that we're specific that Ms. Pamela Ryan, in her capacity as counsel to this body and HRPB, will basically be empowered with, the ability to, decide what's pertinent to this hearing and what's not. I just want to make sure that that's clear. He's going to work with Ms. Ryan, and Ms. Ryan will basically be given the ability to decide what's relevant, what's allowed in this presentation, and what's not. So I don't want there to be any confusion.
Yeah, I don't think leaving it on us right now to sit here and take a whole new batch of evidence that hasn't been before there, and we're told not to be able to deliberate on it. So I'd also like, if you can, Pam, too, if we can, excuse me, Pamela, if we can do, if you wouldn't mind giving, setting up a meeting, a phone call with me and any other commission members that have questions, because this was a little confusing. And I
Okay,
want to make sure that Mr. Waleski and all parties involved have a chance to review this before we do this again, please.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Madam
We got a
Mayor.
motion on the floor. Yes, Commissioner Hart.
Does the motion maker find that amendment to be a friendly one?
I do. I think it's truly is in the spirit of what the original motion. And I just want to ask our attorney, that's perfectly okay to proceed that direction?
Yes, and if he, if he opposes it in any way, I will make sure that you have a written document that discusses the issues.
Okay.
I hate to say it this way, but I don't have a dog in the fight in terms of the procedure. I want to make sure that it is done correctly. It is done in the same manner that we have done all previous appeals, and how we will do it in the future for all future appeals. So I will definitely meet with Mr. Waleski. I will point to if I have to give him case law, I will do that to help him to understand what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. If he wants to put together pictures, as staff did, if you think about staff's presentation, everything that was in that presentation went back to the presentation at HRPB. And that's the way it's supposed to be done. And perhaps, even though I spoke with Mr. Waleski, he may not have understood me clearly, but I assure you, I will do everything I can to help him to understand the city's rules and codes on these issues.
I agree. And I also want to say, though, too, that, it's really hard when we're trying to play by the rules here. When someone gets approved on a project and then unapproved on there's extenuating circumstances here. And I want to make sure that we're fair to all parties involved at this point. We all need to hone up on some research. Vice Mayor, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And may I ask of staff that we have in our backup what you showed us tonight? Because in our backup, we have no pictures, we have none of the graphs, none of the stuff that you showed we have. So we really can't touch it and feel it. We can just see it on the screen. Thank you.
The presentation as presented can be included as a packet within the updated information on the 30th.
Great,
Just
thank
to clarify, there was a link in the executive brief. Was that not accessible? Just so we know. No? Was that the issue? Okay.
No, and a lot of us, we take the books too, so you can't.
That's fine. We'll make sure that they have
We'll
copies of
take
everything.
care of that, and we can include the presentation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
appears to be
Commissioner Robinson, you had a question too?
Can I ask if it's legal then to go back and watch, if that's possible, the February 12th meeting?
The city commission can absolutely watch the meeting. Yes, you may watch the entire meeting. Because
Okay.
that's a part, the minutes are a part of it. And if there were a transcript, that would be a part of it. The hearing, we can make sure that you receive a copy of it, the audio and the video, and you can watch the entire thing yourself. Absolutely.
And so none of that happened on the February 12th, what he was going to present tonight is different than February 12th?
There are new illustrations, analyses that's here that they absolutely did not have it in their packet. I have compared the two to make sure that I was not missing something or reading it wrong, and they don't compare. And
All right, well, that's based on their decision, right?
I apologize.
What he would be presenting tonight would be because of their decision on February 12th.
Exactly. And that's not an appeal. That would be appropriate if what they did was a recommendation to the city commission. And that way you could review everything that they did. And it basically gives a person an opportunity to provide further insight for your review. And you've had that, and it's easy to get confused because you have had the opportunity to look at what was done in the past and what with new pictures to clarify, for them to make their point, for staff to make its point. A lot of the things that he tried to put in tonight, I'm sure that staff would have put in different information to show it, but they can't do that either. And I've explained that to them just as well. You can't add new information. You have to be, you are not second guessing what HRPB did. You're looking at the information they were given, and you're making the decision as to whether or not it was arbitrary and capricious. Did they just make it up? Or did they review what was in front of them, and did it make sense according to the rules that they're bound by?
And if we're going to have it on the 30th, you'll give us the definition of arbitrary and capricious at that time, or do you want to give it to it tonight?
Well, I mean, I could look one up on the internet, but I'd like to give you something that's that nobody can fight about. I can give you my own idea of what arbitrary and capricious is. But
And the public needs to hear it too.
we will make sure that it is added to the presentation. And maybe you'll give staff an extra few minutes to discuss the board member responsibilities so that you all are clear on that. We may put the ordinance up, and that's not new information. It's the ordinance. It would be the ordinance that defines what it is HRPB is supposed to do. And we will put the definition of arbitrary and capricious up.
And can you include subjectivity then too? When your definitions?
I'll let you do that. Subjectivity is not in the code of ordinances, the word subjectivity.
All right, so we've got a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to recess for a few minutes for a bathroom break, and we'll be right back, folks.
All right, I'm gonna get a cup of coffee. This may be over by 8.
Yeah, you were a lot closer.
He does agree with me. That was a crack at HRPB.
Can I have 30 seconds to go to my office and come right back up here?
Okay, Madam Mayor, it's 7:52. If you're ready, we're back.
I'm ready. Let's resume the city commission meeting with item new business B, and that is creating a task force to make recommendations to the city commission on the issue of eradicating systemic racism in the city of Lake Worth Beach. Commissioner Robinson, did you want to lead us in the discussion?
You want to take a motion? Is there a?
Oh, yeah. I'll entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Pro Tem. Is that you, Commissioner Maxwell?
That's me.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Hardy. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
All right. Yes, Commissioner Maxwell?
Yeah, my motion is, for discussion. Moving for the discussion.
For discussion,
Right.
okay.
Is that a?
Commissioner, you're muted.
Is that a movement to discuss the
No,
item?
no, I'm just saying, I'm making a motion to move forward with the discussion on this item.
So there's not allowing a vote, is that what you're saying?
Not at all. Let's not complicate this. It's not that
Okay.
complicated.
Okay. So you have a movement to have a discussion on it. Do you still second that, Commissioner Hardy?
I thought it was a motion so it's not a motion to set a special meeting?
And I was making a motion with being muted. So,
Madam Mayor, maybe it's best if I withdraw my motion. And maybe, would that be better? Because I don't think we all understand what we're talking about right now.
Motion to set a special meeting then.
Okay, a second.
are we going to create a task? Is that motion to set a special meeting as a task force?
Commissioner Hardy?
Yes, motion to set a special meeting to create a task force with 5 committees to make recommendations to the city commission on the issue of eradicating systemic racism in the city of Lake Worth Beach.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
Yes, I seconded it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So your hand up. I thought you wanted to start.
Well,
Since
we're asking for a vote now.
No, we're not. No, we just needed a first and second so we could start the conversation like we always do on every item. We can't have the discussion until we have a motion and a second.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner Maxwell?
I apologize. I desperately would like to find out, for some reason, I can't find my raise hand button, but I don't want this to go off for a
If
vote.
you-
until we've
You
had a
know what?
conversation.
If you hit the button on the bottom that says participants now, on the
Yeah.
very bottom of the screen on the right-hand side that has the list of participants,
Right.
On the it says on the bottom, it says invite, mute me, raise hand. On the
Okay,
very
thank
bottom of the
Thank
white
you. Thank you.
banner.
It's an
Okay.
optical, I'm sorry, it's an optical thing. I'm getting old. Thank you.
I can barely
Thank
see the screen I get you.
All right.
Commissioner Robinson?
Well, given the fact that there apparently is a lot of public input, and we're now open for discussion, and this is a difficult topic, and given our sunshine meeting on Monday night of last, nothing of concrete decision was made, and I'm just saying that for the sake of moving forward, I would just as soon sooner rather than later have a vote on setting a task force, a meeting and a task force. But we'll hear. I'm interested in hearing from the public.
Commissioner Hardy?
Yes, so Commissioner Robinson and I had a healthy discussion about this. And if anyone else were recommending a task force, I probably would not support it. And the reason why is because I tend to think that when politicians want task forces to look into things, it typically draws out the discussion and the issue past which time the politicians can themselves have done something, right? And so I recognize that there's a need to bring different groups of people to the table, PPSO, folks in the community, Black people, Latinx people, and so on. I believe, frankly, that we could do that here on the commission and just invite different folks into our meetings to take part in the discussion. But if it is Commissioner Robinson's desire to have a task force, I know that Commissioner Robinson is sincere in his desire to get something done on this. I just want to make sure that we set this task force up in a way that it has to act. And so I would like there to be, basically, I would like us to move with all speed to set this task force up. I'm wondering if 30 days is too long to figure out who's going to be on this thing. And I'm hoping that in particular, when it comes to the Committee on Police Reform, that we can get recommendations back as soon as they can be made. And on many of these reforms, folks have been thinking about these issues for a long time. On body cameras, for example, I got elected 3 years ago. The body worn cameras clearinghouse had already been set up by the Criminal Justice Commission here in Palm Beach County. There is reams, there are reams and reams of data and information and best practices and all these sorts of things. I just want this stuff to move quickly. I don't want this to become these task forces or rather this task force and the committees that it's composed of. I don't want this to become a place where things slow down. And so if we can make sure that between now and when we have a special meeting to vote on creating these task forces, that we can devise a structure and a way for them to operate that leads to them moving quickly. So I'm in support of the idea. I want them to move fast, especially on police reform.
All right, Commissioner Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm looking for some clarity here. Our agenda item calls for the creation of a task force to make recommendations to the City Commission on the issue of eradicating systemic racism in the city of Lake Worth Beach. However, what I'm hearing here is that there's a move to have another meeting to discuss this again. And I thought we were here to discuss that item this evening. And I'm interested in hearing Commissioner Robinson's presentation on what he has in mind and how he wants to set it up and the methodology behind all that.
Points of information?
Yes.
My understanding, and I wonder if the city attorney can correct me here, my understanding is that the reason why the recommended motion is to set a special meeting is because of the stricture that was placed on this item by Commissioner Maxwell in the previous meeting.
City Attorney?
I think that is correct. It's my understanding, that there was going to be a presentation tonight of some sort, which would help the commission to decide whether or not to set a special meeting. If you've made a decision to set the special meeting, you can do that. If you want, and I think the special meeting is needed so that you can have the players there. You hopefully identify who those people will be before the special meeting, if possible, so that you can take some action at the next meeting. Because it's my understanding that you want the task force to start working within 30 days of the meeting. So we need to get moving if we're going to be timely in terms of deadlines that you've kind of set for yourselves.
Okay, Commissioner, let's see, Commissioner, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I have just some comments and questions to start. So I don't really have a problem with a task force. I think my problem is a 20 or a 30 person task force. I definitely think the right people need to be there. But why would, and maybe this is a question to Commissioner Hardy or Robinson from their last meeting. Commissioner Hardy, you had mentioned quite a few groups that are already working on some of the issues. And I know that National League of City has a race and equality group. And then also there's Urban League. Why would we not reach out to these groups and have them present some of their findings and look to them for direction instead of setting up another whole group?
Well,
and again, I support, but if there's already people doing the work and have some of the information we need, because I would assume that the group we put together would be reaching out to these other groups anyway. So why wouldn't we start with those groups that may already have the data and the information and maybe some suggestions based on their data and information? I think that we should definitely look at maybe creating an office of racial equality, you know, and have it homegrown. But that's my question at the moment. You know, why would we not invite those groups that already have the data and have been working on the issues and bring them to it instead of, I think that 20 or 30 people trying to put them together in 30 days and then ask for their information to come back in 90 days. You know, we have a hard time trying to get people on our regular boards. And I know that there's a lot of passionate people in the city of Lake Worth Beach, but you know, that would be my question. Why wouldn't we start with the groups that already have the data?
And that was my concern too. When I asked about the meeting, the main issue I had with the last meeting was not the formation of a task force. It was the fact that in our last meeting that we shared together, everyone has to submit their comments before the meeting starts because we're having these virtual meetings. And if we would have added something to the agenda at the last meeting, nobody could fill out public comment cards. So if we would have started talking about these things at the last commission meeting, there was nobody would have known that it was going to be on there, and nobody would have been able to comment on it. So that was the concern that I had, which I expressed and I worded it just as such. So that was my concern that time. This time I have concern over, and one of the reasons why I called the meeting, the special meeting, was because number one, I had the meeting scheduled with the U.S. Conference of Mayors who was going to be addressing this, and I thought they were going to come back with their idea of a plan. Number two was that I wanted to sign the Obama.org plan, and I wanted to discuss it with you because I didn't want to sign it without having you guys talk about it. And number three, I had a meeting with Sheriff Bradshaw, and all the other mayors that utilize his services, and got his response to the Obama.org pledge and his answer to all of the questions that were addressed in the 8 Can't Wait. So that's what I wanted to discuss with you, what those organizations came back to say about those items, and actually have a plan. But now I'm seeing, because I have a plan in the backup, Commissioner Robinson, that you put forward Is this your item with A, B, C, D, all of that? Did you put all of this together, Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay, so I thought we were getting a presentation today, kind of like with the vice mayor.
No, I'm asking for a vote to set up a task force.
Madam.
And that was the original, 2 weeks ago, that was the original request. And then it became convoluted in that we wanted to talk to everybody before. And all we had to do was either say yes or no, and you did say no, to a task force. Again, I'm asking for a task force which will include all those people you wanted to talk to.
Madam Mayor.
Hold on 1 second. I just want to address Commissioner Robinson. I didn't say no to a task force. I said no to adding it on the agenda, thinking that there would be more discussion on it. And I wanted to involve the public in that discussion, because I don't think this is a top-down approach to a task force or to addressing systemic racism or any of that. I think that we should be working with the community from the ground floor up, not top down. And I think that reaching out to the people in our community is the first and most important thing of addressing anything. And that's why I spoke that, and that's why I said that. There's no other reason for it. Commissioner Hardy?
Yeah, so let's get something really clear. And the mistake was just made by both Commissioner Robinson and yourself, Madam Mayor. What Commissioner Robinson asked for in the last meeting was not to set up a task force. If you listen carefully to what he tried to add to the agenda, it was a discussion about whether to have a special meeting at which we could discuss setting up a task force, okay? So the public note, there was nothing substantive to discuss. Commissioner Robinson was not trying to discuss substantive issues about the task force, the composition of a task force. All he wanted was consent on whether to have a meeting at a future date to discuss setting up a task force. And at that point, there would be substantive discussion as to the composition of the task force, what it will be focused on, so on and so forth. And the stuff about folks not being able to submit public comment cards, given that nothing substantive was requested by Commissioner Robinson, and given that no official action was being taken, I didn't see the issue at all, because the public would still be able to weigh in on the substance of the matter as to whether or not to have a task force and its composition and its topics and so on at that special meeting. And that's why I was so confused as to why Commissioner Robinson was not allowed to add it on. Now, as to what this item is about, I remember the motion that Commissioner Maxwell basically made and got a majority on, asking Commissioner Robinson to formulate, basically to come up with reasons for having a special meeting, not necessarily to come up with the composition of the task force and so on. And that's why at this meeting, it hasn't, the item isn't, do we want to set up a task force still, right? This is the same item that Commissioner Robinson tried to add. So we're still on trying to set up a meeting where a task force could be discussed. Now, I agree that, again, you have to bring folks together, members of the community, so on and so forth. Now, to Commissioner Amoroso's request as to or commentary about whether a 20 to 30 person task force would be unwieldy, I agree that it would, but that's why the document we have here doesn't say 20 to 30, it says 10 to 20. And I don't think such a task force would be unwieldy. And I think, given that we want to involve folks from PBSO, folks from the community, we might want to have a task force of 10 to 20 folks. And that would make it not unlike other task forces in the county, or like, for example, the Criminal Justice Commission and so on. So, I think that we need to set a special meeting. I think the meeting needs to be soon, if we can do it this week. I think if we can get staff to work with all speed to with Commissioner Robinson or anyone else who wants to do this, and to try to figure out what this task force is going to look like, so we can vote it into existence at that meeting. That is, if this body wants to have a task force, and if the body doesn't want to have a task force, if as Commissioner Amoroso said that, why would we recreate the wheel, then the body needs to come up with a plan and to handle this by a certain date, by a certain time, and to have made decisions about stuff that's already out there that we know about. I think a task force is a concrete way to do that. You know, I am for this. I hope that it's put together well so that folks are brought together very quickly, that we process this information very quickly, even if this means that this task force has to meet once a week for a 60 to 90 day period or what have you. This is important. There's momentum on this issue, and we absolutely have to figure out how to get something done. Also, remember, we're coming up on a budget year, you know, that starts on October 1st. These things need to be discussed before we finish up our budget, because I imagine there might be fiscal consequences, positive consequences for some of the things that may come out of this task force.
I just want to ask one question. All right, so first, that was about just having a meeting to ask about a task force, but then a request was come in from, I'm just looking for consistency in this thing, okay? Then then Vice Mayor Pro Tem Maxwell asks for for details on what a task force would look like, and if Commissioner Robinson could come back with those details so we could discuss them. That's what I understand. So I was expecting a presentation today on the items that were included in the backup, which is normal. Any item that comes in with backup information, a presentation is normally done. And then if I'm confused, and I shouldn't be confused because that's all you're looking for, Commissioner Hardy, then why are there 30 comments in the public comment, or 20 comments, or 40 comments? Because people were expecting, they saw a backup item and a presentation, so they were expecting that was going to be addressed, and we were going to talk about it, what constitutes a task force, and what are we looking for in the makeup of it and whatnot. Because I'm assuming that people that, you know, wouldn't have had a chance to speak last meeting because they didn't have a chance to get their cards in, they got their cards in today based on the information that was given. So forgive my confusion, but there's been a lot of confusion, and it's not intentional. It's that it's inconsistent. And I'm just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're all trying to figure it out. I thought Commissioner Robinson was doing a presentation today, but I appreciate your explaining that he's not doing a presentation today.
Well,
I will be glad to present tonight.
Yeah, and you know, just to be clear,
Commissioner Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe that the motion that I made on June 2nd was to ask Commissioner Robinson to bring back an outline of what he wanted to have a conversation. I believe those were his exact words. He goes, I want to have a conversation. And you know, the invitation that I proposed, and again, Madam Mayor, I think you said it very well. I think it would have been inappropriate not to give the public an opportunity at that time to weigh in on such a very, very serious and sensitive subject. But we gave the opportunity. The expectation was that we get a presentation on what Commissioner Robinson thought that conversation should look like. Now, that being said, I don't know where we're going with all this evening, but I would like just to make a couple of comments. Okay, first of all, and Madam Mayor, I appreciate your comments at the beginning of the meeting, talking about how we all need to be working together and you know, just really working very hard to come up with positive results for the issues that are facing us. You know, who would have thought that, you know, 2 months ago, I had conversations with folks telling them that the coronavirus was the most important and significant issue that I, as the public servant, would have to consider and be a part of. And then this horrific, senseless death of George Floyd happens. And then all of a sudden, you know, the priority very quickly, and rightfully so, has changed. And you know what? Our country is hurting right now. And we all need to come together. And the most important thing we as elected officials could do at this moment, okay, at this moment, is to listen. To listen. Okay, I suspect that listening has not been one of the best job skills that elected officials have had for quite some time. And when I look at Commissioner Robinson's agenda item, just on its face, you know, on paper, it seems like, even though it's well-intended, very well-intended, and I applaud Commissioner Robinson. I know he has a good heart. He's a good man. what I see here is elected officials trying to run out ahead of something here and find solutions or answers to questions that maybe we haven't clearly, identified yet. And the reason we haven't identified those questions is because we haven't been asking the right people. And this proposal, as I see it, is clearly, as you said earlier, Madam Mayor, it's a top-down approach to answering those questions. Now, I've worked in the community, I've had the pleasure of being a District 1 commissioner now for many, many years. And arguably, my district is one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse districts in the city. And I've worked with these folks over the years through a lot of different issues, the coronavirus more so on a day-to-day basis. I have relationships with many of the leaders in the community. And what I'm hearing individually and collectively is that, yes, they want to have a conversation. They want to start a conversation, but they also said that, number one, they liked the conversation to begin when things calm down a little bit around the country. In other words, let the calm heads prevail. I think we're getting there now. I think it's been 3 weeks or whatever. Things are, even though there's still unrest and protesting, I think it's time to start having those conversations. But more importantly, these folks, these stakeholders, these affected parties, these folks who have lived the experience and of racism or inequities in their lives, we should be listening to what they have to say.
Absolutely.
So whatever we do, first and foremost begins with our residents. And we need to listen, and we need to listen to where they take the conversation, not where we might want to take the conversation or where we think the conversation could go or how we want to try to steer it. That is not why we're here. Okay, that's not why I'm here, and I certainly am not going to participate in such an endeavor. So my proposal, is that we take a step back for a moment. I think we all agree that the conversation needs to take place, but we need to step back and figure out how we can directly work with the residents and the stakeholders in our community and set them up in a situation where they can tell us how they feel. They can tell us the hurt they've experienced, the harm that's been dealt them over the years. And then we ask them two fundamental questions at the end. The first question is, what is it that the city of Lake Worth Beach needs to acknowledge with respect to what we have done historically in our city through our policies, through our direct actions, whatever the case may be? What is it that we need to acknowledge? Because the first step in the healing process, of course, is acknowledging that there's a problem or there has been a problem. The second thing we need to ask these folks is, of course, what would they like to see done? What can we do to fix these issues? Okay. And then finally, I think hopefully in the very early days of those conversations, we should be able to craft some sort of a public policy statement that the five of us can adopt as our official City of Lake Worth position on race and equity issues. I disagree, okay, with some of the dialogue that has taken place over the formation of this task force, that somehow there should be a time frame attached to it. The notion that somehow hundreds of years of racism and discrimination can be addressed and solved, or remedies found and put into place in the course of 90 days, 60 days, 6 months, whatever, is, I think, foolhardy. I think that the conversation that we're all willing to participate in is going to be an ongoing conversation. It's not going to be an event. It's going to be a marathon. And we're going to find new things out at every step of that conversation, every chapter of that conversation. So there's not going to be an easy series of meetings or roundtables or whatever that we're going to be able to take a flip chart and write down all the issues and all the potential answers, and then we're just going to adopt them. That's not what's going to happen. The most important thing we need to do is start the conversation again with the folks locally, okay, and let them guide us let them share with us what's in their hearts, and we need to be listening. For the first time, this country has come together. This is a watershed moment. Everybody agrees that we need to do something. Everybody agrees. I know of no one that disagrees with this. So we should seize that opportunity and not make the mistakes that have been made in the past. Okay, in my humble estimation and reflection on, government and how we've dealt with race relations and equity issues over the last 50 years, at least in my adult life, is everything's been top down. And I think that what I'm hearing from some of the residents in the community is, you know what, we're tired of lip service. We're tired of people coming around and saying, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and none of it ever comes to fruition. Okay, it's always better to get the buy-in of the folks that are affected in that respect. So that's how I feel about this, Madam Mayor. I hope I've been able to articulate properly my feelings, and I hope I haven't convoluted the conversation, but I cannot support the creation of a task force that we're going to go out and appoint people from different areas of the community in terms of organizations and agencies and things like that, until we've had an opportunity to speak directly with our residents and have them be the primary source of the conversation and the direction that we need to take. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Madam Mayor, can we hear from the public?
Yeah. All right. City.
Madam
County-
Mayor?
Yes.
Mr.
Hardy?
Yeah, just, very directly to some of the things that Commissioner Maxwell spoke about. I recognize that as elected officials, it's our job to bring people together around solutions. And it is our job to solicit feedback from the public, from members of the community before enacting public policy. And that's precisely what this task force seeks to do. We have a commission. We are empowered to make laws and policy changes with respect to the city. And we would be well within our authority and well within the authority that the voters gave us to exercise on their behalf in this representative democracy to do so. In this particular case, especially given the sense of urgency that members of the public feel. That said, what Commissioner Robinson has brought forward is exactly the mechanism to gather the varied perspectives of the communities that exist in this city. A task force would not be composed solely of members of this commission. It would involve folks from the community. And so, what better way to begin a productive conversation about making changes that involves members of the community than by asking civic organizations that serve this community to choose individuals to be a part of a task force that will work together with the commission to recommend changes here in the city. I don't know a better way to do this. And, on the idea that we should not try to do this on a deadline because these problems are so thick and hairy and complicated that we can't possibly figure them out quickly. The wonderful thing about this subject of racial equity across all the different domains that Commissioner Robinson has proposed we study it, is that folks have already been doing this work for years and decades. And so, when it comes to police reform, there are at least 5 groups off the top of my head that I can tell you have been doing this work for a long time and have been publishing documents repeatedly, whether that was the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, whether that's Campaign Zero, whether that's Dream Defense. You can go organization after organization, and they have document upon document on reforms that we could adapt to this city and our form of government that would enact some changes and put in place some systems that I think people would probably want to see, given what they are admitting is the problem, which is unaccountable, policing in this respect. Same thing goes for housing. It's not like folks haven't already written books on this stuff. Same thing goes for education, right? So there is a vast ocean of literature on these topics. And the idea that we need all this time to explore these issues and to enact changes that we can do here locally I don't believe that that's necessary, especially when it comes to policing reform, because so much work has already been done on it, even in this county. So the time for this conversation is right now. It's not tomorrow. It's right now while there's momentum. And I don't see why we can't just have a special meeting to figure out what a task force should look like, and then go ahead and bring that task force forth. It's just, this is not rocket science here. This is not rocket science.
Commissioner Maxwell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree partially with Commissioner Hardy. There have been many studies done. There have been many resources made available on all types of reform and things that could be done, potential things that could be done to address equity issues. And what I failed to mention in my comments previous is that I've had a number of phone conversations with the National League of Cities, more specifically the Race, Equity, and Leadership Department, division, if you will. They were put together just right after the Ferguson murder in, I guess it was 2015. So they've been in existence. This particular arm of the National League of Cities has been in existence for 5 years or so, and they have a plethora of information, guides, workbooks, etc. But more importantly, they have the human resources to physically or virtually, I guess, maybe in this new era that we're in, to actually facilitate the conversations that I believe we all want to have and that should take place. And I think that that's really where we need to go. I mean, with all due respect, as much as I think I'm a pretty bright guy, I don't want to presume to want to carry on a conversation like this, knowing the right way to do it because of the sensitivities involved and all the things that go with that. It's so important. It's so important that what we do it correctly. We do it right and we do it well. And more importantly, it needs to be transparent. It needs to be in such a way that all the participants feel like their voice is being heard. And that's really what this is all about. Yes, there are agencies out there that deal with specific issues, but let's bring those agencies in after we've had the conversation and the community tells us what their priorities are, what their most immediate needs, what they're most concerned about today. What is it the most that we could do today to make their life better? And then we check that off, and then we say, okay, what's the next thing? And the other thing. And just for clarification's purposes, I never implied or suggested that this should take a long time. I think my comments were centered around the idea that the conversation will begin, and the conversation will take us wherever the conversations will take us for whatever time period it takes. And to box me in and suggest that I'm trying to drag this out is inappropriate, and I hope it's just a misunderstanding on Commissioner Hardy's part.
Madam Mayor.
Listen, can I speak? I'm sorry, I thought I could too. I just wanted to reference what Vice Mayor Pro Tem was just talking about in reference to the National League of Cities. And I had gotten this letter. This was as part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors from the meeting that I had the other day. This went to Honorable Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Charles Schumer. And we wrote to express our support for Congress to take thoughtful and decisive action to work toward police reform and social justice. We applaud the introduction of the Justice and Policing Act of 2020, which includes provisions relating to critical areas in which reform is badly needed. And we're heartened to see additional conversations happening around police reform. The U.S. Conference of Mayors is committed to meaningful reforms to address police violence and patterns of racial discrimination in our own communities and beyond. Conference President and Rochester Hills Mayor Brian Barnett has asked us to serve as members of Police Reform and Racial Justice Working Group, charged us with outlining a series of specific recommendations related to America's policing practices to help end the injustices facing Black Americans. At their first meeting, they discussed the bill and wanted them to know of their commitment to working with them on it. And the U.S. Conference strongly believes and urges that they and other members of Congress talk with mayors and police chiefs about all these issues. As mayors, we're on the front lines of this important conversation with our community, and many mayors and chiefs initiated police reform and accountability measures years ago and have a wealth of experience to add to this most important discussion. We stand ready to meet with you, the bill sponsors, or other congressional leaders. And right now we're in the process of working together to put these reforms in place. And we have an opportunity right now to make some needed and important reforms to policing and to work towards racial justice. And let's seize this moment together. And this is one of the things that I am sure the league is coming out with their own. They've already got the task force in place, including Mayor Lightfoot and other people in law enforcement, as well as mayors from around the country, from tiny cities to the biggest ones, Garcetti from Los Angeles, and of course, New York, de Blasio, and everybody else in Boston, Marty Walsh. And, you know, they're working on putting some of these ideas together. I think that's big picture stuff. Again, going back to what the Vice Mayor Pro Tem was talking about, finding out from our community what their exact needs are. Us, you know, we've got these layers in place of here. We can do what we can within our community, and we can work to impact things on a national basis or a state basis too. But we get more traction with the state and the national basis when we enlist our friends to help us with those things and help create those policies. Right now, because of what's going on in the world, I think that we really need to address the people in our community immediately and find out what their needs are now. And I appreciate, I think that I understand you want results quickly, Commissioner Hardy. I appreciate that. Trust me, I do, because nothing sits worse to my craw than sitting there waiting for something to happen and politics or government makes it take 10 times longer. So I appreciate that. Having a time limit on it, I'm not so great with, because I want things to take the process, but I think that we can start relatively soon. I think we can reach out to the communities, and I'm really looking forward to doing that. I'm okay with the task force, and I'm okay with us moving forward. I don't necessarily agree with all the items in the backup for a task force, so I'd want to work on those and go through some of those and really relate them specifically to what we can do within our community in reference to this, and how we can join our friends to impact the state and the country and the world for that matter. But I want to make sure that we're addressing our citizens' needs too, and that they come first and foremost.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner Hardy?
you know, with all due respect to the National Conference of Mayors and the League of Cities and Eric Garcetti and Bill de Blasio, those folks have zero credibility with me. The city that Eric Garcetti runs responded to peaceful protesters basically by nightsticking them during the protest. Bill de Blasio's officers ran people over in the middle of the streets, pushed people down, and his initial response when these, these officers in this truck basically drove into a crowd that was standing there was that, well, if they had just gotten out of the way. Bill de Blasio, Eric Garcetti, U.S. Conference of Mayors, who has done little to nothing in a substantive way over the last Lord knows how many years, has zero credibility with me and zero credibility with a lot of people who have been very intentionally doing the work on the ground in their communities and by way of various think tanks. They have zero credibility with me, and frankly, what I'm hearing is well-meaning. It's well-meaning, but what I'm hearing is institutional procrastination. That's what I'm hearing. And again, the fact that these reforms have been enacted in other cities tells us that we need not recreate the wheel here. I think it's very important to hear from the public in terms of outcomes. I want to be a Black man who feels safe when a police car drives by me. I want to know that I can go to a bank and get a mortgage and not pay, X number of basis points over and above a white person with a similar credit history. I want to have access to healthcare on par with folks who are not of color. I think those are the basic outcomes that if you were to talk to folks, a lot of folks would hear. But when it comes to policy and methodology, that's what we are elected to do. Now, I still think that what Commissioner Robinson has proposed, a task force composed of committees with members from the community on it, is a perfect melding of this, kind of bubbling up from the bottom, or bubbling up from the demos as far as solutions go, and this idea that we are elected representatives and we're elected to use our judgment as far as this these policy making concerns are to be considered. But I don't see much in the way of difficulty in putting together a task force and having a deadline for certain of these issues. Some of these issues we can discuss repeatedly, but the idea that when the stuff has already been thought out and implemented other places, that we need more than 90 days to figure out how to make that work here, I just cannot believe that. We are capable. We are capable.
I'm not saying that we're not. Point of information though, do we city manager make decisions about financial and banking institutions and how they handle certain, I mean, can we impact that as one city, or do we have to be a group of cities coming together to do something like that?
Policy on banking is something that's not technically under jurisdiction, but there is power in numbers when you work with the league and the other cities.
Correct. I just wanted to make sure that people understood that some of the items in the backup are talking about issues that we alone cannot influence. We can talk about them, we can make recommendations, but we can't necessarily influence them unless we have the backing of the state or the federal government or our friends.
Madam Mayor, there are things on each and every one of these items that are in here. There are things that individual local governments can do. For example, if I were to pull up this item, financial security. Access to credit is something that local governments around the country have individually done work on, whether that's microloans, whether that, there are a number of ways to impact this stuff that don't require drawing in other people. Right. So I think some of these solutions to these problems, these disparities, these gaps, these inequities require stuff done here that we can do alone and stuff that we can do together with other people and stuff that even if we were to team up with other cities, we can't do because there needs state or federal legislation. But the idea that we can't move immediately right now today or over the next 60 to 90 days on some of this stuff on our own is it's just not true.
I don't disagree with you. I'm not saying that we could
move immediately on the things we can do now. And for the things that we can't do now, for the things that we can't do on our own, put that stuff on a separate track. But we need deliverables immediately, if not sooner.
I would rather sit and have a task force meeting where we all can sit and go through like I thought today, as I mentioned earlier, that Commissioner Robinson was going to go through these items. And I thought we were going to kind of go through, hey, this is something that we can do in our community. And this is something that we might need the help of our neighbors to do something about, whatever. Would it be, I thought we were going to literally go one by one and talk about that and create a new type of formatting for a task force that, and maybe something a little bit more realistic in reference to numbers and kind of talk about each issue. But now you're saying we're going to have another meeting that we can talk about those issues, which is okay, which I'm willing to come back to that. I mean, if you want to have another meeting to talk about, that's fine. But I want to nail these items so that we can all be together on them, because there's no reason to not be together.
I understand that, but recognize that that's what the item said. Commissioner Robinson wanted to have a meeting where we discuss substantively these issues.
What is the reason for your point of order?
I just think that I'd like to hear what Commissioner Robinson says. I'm hearing Commissioner Hardy speak on Commissioner Robinson's behalf.
No, he isn't.
Oh, okay.
He's speaking for himself, and you've certainly said enough verbiage for yourself. And I've heard from the mayor about top-down decisions, and then we talk about involving the community. I mean, either we're going to have it top-down and rely on the League of Cities, and or we're going to talk and separate out and try and make it as efficient as possible by putting the responsibility and leadership on this commission to address systemic racism in the city. And if we don't I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'd appreciate your comment.
No, I was just saying, I think we should work from the community up, but I was saying use those organizations when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to agenda making on the large things that we're going to need the cooperation. But in the meantime, we can start with our community, and that's where I think we should start.
When? It's been 2 weeks and there's been a half a dozen deaths based on race in the country. And I thank God that nothing tragic like that has happened in Lake Worth. It shows that we have good sheriffs on the street, and we have good citizens that haven't forced any violence. But if we don't do something, it's on us. We're supposed to be the leaders, and the public obviously has an interest in this because there's at least 20 people that have commented. And if we can't break it down into, and I'm open for suggestions, into five-person committee with a commissioner responsible for police as one, education for one, housing for one, health and human services for one, and financial security. If there's something else you want to talk about, or if we want to break it down to make it more efficient, I'm interested in efficiency and addressing the issue now, rather than putting it off for I don't know how long, because we've already put it off 2 weeks, and we're talking around and around about not doing anything. So
I agree with you.
we all have an approach, a different approach apparently, and that's why it's a difficult. Commissioner Hardy and I had a conversation last Monday, and it was almost a 3-hour meeting, and I'm not sure that we nailed down anything in terms of moving forward. But if we don't, if you want to talk about it tonight, that's fine. If you want to have a meeting to address a task force, and
No, I'm all for either, but I just need.
Let's set a date.
That's fine, but I just need a specific on what it is exactly that we're doing. I was just told by Commissioner Hardy that this was not a meeting to discuss the items. It was a meeting to set a date to have a discussion on the items. But then again, all these people have their public comment cards because backup was provided to hear. Do we having a meeting now about having a meeting? It sounds like a Seinfeld episode.
But that's what Commissioner Maxwell's motion. Commissioner Maxwell asked not for Commissioner Robinson to outline a task force. His motion asked for Commissioner Robinson to outline how a workshop about a task force would proceed. Correct. That's what Commissioner Maxwell asked for. And this conversation is stricken by that motion. And that's the thing here. So we can't have a discussion about the task force or the substance. And I get that folks have put in their public comment cards, but if you go back and listen to what Commissioner Maxwell said, and the motion that was made by this board that gave Commissioner Robinson the authority to work with Ms. Ryan on this issue, it was specifically about outlining a workshop, not about outlining the task force, but about outlining the workshop. Therefore, that's what, and I get people have their public comment cards, but they are mistaken if what they are talking about
because
they're as confused
as I am, and that's why, again, thinking that what's on the item right now was for Commissioner Robinson to do his presentation on how he sees a task force coming together, and yet in all of our conversation, we have not heard Commissioner Robinson tell us those items so we could discuss those items together and move forward with a task force presentation. I've heard everybody else talking about it. I've heard you talking a lot about it, but Commissioner Robinson didn't present his thoughts and ideas, which is what I thought we were going to do tonight, what I thought the public was going to comment on, which is I think what they thought they were going to comment on too. But in the meantime, let's go to the public because we've got a lot of comment cards. City Clerk.
Madam Mayor, the first comment is from Patrick Livingston. Dear city leaders, first, I would like to thank all of you for your dedicated service and unwavering commitment to the community. We've all been affected by the COVID-19 virus and the impact this had on Florida. To further complicate an already difficult time, we are all witnessing unthinkable tragedies that has turned this country upside down and led to unrest. Now is the time for us to heal. As leaders in the community, we need to reflect on the role we each play and how we move forward. Based on my interactions and numerous conversations with people in the community, the general consensus is that it is time to be heard and to be understood. For this to happen, we have to do it together. Coming together will give everyone a platform, a voice. These insights will be our foundation to develop a cohesive and effective plan, a plan that we can put into action to help move us forward positively. I implore each of you to reconsider, vote to put a task force together. It's not a bandage on such a deep, let's not put a bandage on such a deep wound. Doing so will ultimately create an even bigger wound because it wasn't allowed to heal properly, only covered. These are some serious issues that has magnified over the past few years. Let's not drag our feet. I truly hope you will reconsider this request to help make this community the gem that it can become. Yours truly, Patrick A. Livingston. Carlos Benacourt writes, good morning, dear sir and madam. I thought this note, through this note, I want to express myself against the creation of a task force that is supposed to deal with the issues in the city of Lake Worth without consultation with city leaders and people of this great city. Please make notice that until this is not done correctly, I am against this. If any person wishes to contact me, please do so at my phone number, 561-452-5679. Email carlosb5081@gmail.com. Thank you. Yours, Dr. Carlos J. Benacourt, Church of God in Lake Worth, Hispanic Division, Iglesia de Dios, Puerta del Cielo, 709 North F Street, Lake Worth. Ellie Lusant writes about police brutality and her ideas on the subject. The policemen know the law is in their side. They can do anything, even if they kill somebody, they will get away from it. They will not be guilty. Until we change the law, the policeman will do it again and again. The solution is make each police accountable for his actions. Justice for all. The police should not be above the law. They are doing a difficult job, but they must be trained properly. If the policemen get discharged from one state for brutality, they should not get hired in another state. Ramsey Stevens of 618 South K Street writes, Honorable Mayor and Commissioners, I'd like to express my support for the establishment of this proposed task force to examine ways to improve racial equity in our city. The more we can communicate with each other, the more we can find ways to work together, and the more we can make things better together. Sincerely, Ramsey Stevens. Jamas writes, we are aware people have questions about the amount of dollars we spend on our police department and the exact verbiage in our contract with PBSO. Yet a more pressing question is the choice of defunding and or reforming of police departments. Here on the South Side, our police force is much needed. The idea we should allow low-level crime to go unchecked to prevent any possible incidents, parens, which was recently suggested by a commissioner in a public forum, end parens, is not a solution. Southside residents feel at this time there is no evidence our PBSO officers have or would conduct themselves in an inappropriate manner. And until then, we should not judge PBSO officers otherwise. In addition, low-level crime is merely the pathway to unlawful, heinous crimes. And in the meantime, good law-abiding citizens have to suffer from these acts. The thought of allowing people to peddle drugs as long as it's a low amount and to allow prostitution without repercussion is just absurd. As stated before in emails to PBSO and to our commissioners, ordinances and laws should be enforced as written. Please find attached our suggestions to PBSO assigned to Lake Worth Beach, police reform. And he writes about the police reform that he's looking for: Civilian Oversight Committee, a 7-member board, 2 appointed by PBSO, 2 appointed by City Commission, 3 appointed by NAPC, with emphasis on investigating abuse of authority and complaints of misconduct on the part of PBSO. Examples, but not limited to: unauthorized searches and seizures, unauthorized entry into private property, refusal to provide name and shield number, acts of rude or unprofessional manner, patterns of systemic discrimination. So, and number 2 is subpoena power. the ability to issue summons to Lake Worth Beach PBSO officers, detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, commanders, captains, and deputy chiefs for review and rebuttal to complaints against officers, officials, or clarification of procedures. 3 PBS officers, detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, commanders, captain, and deputy chief should be voted in annually or upon special circumstances by Lake Worth Beach residents. The next part is registry-database. Item 1, use of force. 2, reported misconduct. 3, profile of every PBS officer and official. The next section is ability to recruit. Item 1, Lake Worth Beach residents should have the ability to recruit and request for employment / assignment to Lake Worth Beach of any certified PBSO officer / official. And finally, the PBSO tracker. Item 1, tracking of beat officers, and 2, excluding of non-beat officers. Next item is written by Edmund DeVoe. Good evening. I would like to take the opportunity, the time to thank everyone who's battled for racial injustice. We are the grassroots of the healing process in which to start. But before, as a city, county, state, country, have to take ownership of something that have been plaguing our country for decades, no matter how difficult or embarrassing or what party line you may be affiliated with, which is racial injustice. And this is a broad area. And then the conversation can start with those who have been impacted, and then city, and then a task force in which to focus on. But these 2 conditions must be considered. First, it is not the right time for a task force board. I have been involved in a few meetings and I have stated the same. Your hearts may be in the right place. However, not meeting with those first who have been impacted the most shall be another slap in the face. In closing, you are the city leader. Sometimes you are pitted against one another or power play. You are hearing from a person saying, leave that play in your car. This is a social issue for all mankind. You 5 must speak the same thing. This is a defining moment in America. This is a Father's Day weekend. My father said, this is America, son, and America always come on the right side. The world is watching. We are at the starting block. Good evening. Kim Stokes of 1321 North L Street writes, the public should know what PBSO is doing with the money they receive from our city. The commission should make a line item budget easily available to us. If they don't have this information, they should make getting it from PBSO a priority and a non-negotiable item. Next item is Jeannie Hoban. She writes, while I applaud and wholeheartedly support Commissioners Hardy and Robinson's efforts in this area, I believe we must look further down the field for any true change and healing to occur in this community. The recent killing of Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta is a perfect example of how we have criminalized social problems in our society. The sheriff has reported that the jail is the largest mental health and substance abuse treatment facility in Palm Beach County. This is not an accurate portrayal. As a licensed mental health professional, I can say that incarceration is not the recommended treatment for any mental health or substance abuse diagnosis. We know there are systemic issues of racism in all areas of our society. We know there is a deep mistrust of law enforcement within our communities of color. My opinion of a task force to address these deep-rooted issues is that would only be putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. We must hold the sheriff's office accountable for their contact with our city. We must demand 1, eliminate qualified immunity and report bad cops. 2, eliminate stop and frisk practices. 3, rethink overcriminalization. 4, require PBSO to offer mental health as an adjunctive service to community policing. 5, increased transparency that addresses police misconduct. I urge this commission, all 5 of you, to work cooperatively to plan the strategy for Lake Worth Beach. This will take all of your political will, but this is not the time for cowardice. Feigned powerlessness is not acceptable. It is time for change in the way we do business with PBSO. As a resident, I would be happy to help in any way I can. Thank you, Jeannie Hoban. This letter is from several people. They've asked that I read their names at the end. Dear Mayor and Commissioners, it is both a sophisticated and politically sensitive act that you have chosen to host a meeting regarding racism and police community relations in Lake Worth Beach. Given the demographics of the city, it has become essential. But at this meeting, it is also essential that you set up an immediate public conversation between yourselves and police executives. At that meeting, the mayor and commissioners could offer singular or several reforms that would enhance police community relations. Ideally, with some consensus, some or all of these reforms could be tucked into a renewed policing contract in August. Time is of the essence. If this effort drags on or devolves into hair splitting and bickering, this vital conversation will never take place, and the train will have left the station. And with that, your constituents will be left with the feeling that nothing is real and nothing ever gets done. The commitment to establishing this timely meeting is the important thing. Who believes in reforms or who doesn't is secondary importance, because without this commitment to a meeting with the police, no reforms can be discussed or implemented, and no progress can be made or understanding be advanced. The idea of a task force is a good idea. It should not take precedent over immediate meeting with police. A task force will take months to establish and months to appoint and months to report. By that time, other issues will have evolved and other priorities will resurface. Nonetheless, it could prove to become a long-term benefit to the city. However, in the crucial short term, act tonight to call a meeting quickly so that you can have constructive discussion with the police. It is a new day and things have to be understood, and change must come if our city is to continue to advance and flourish. It's written by Don Rosenshine, John Wright, Diane Brown, Michael Ringwood, Ted Johnson, Liz Ward, Hal Cantor, Matthew Kettle, Boyd Grove, Tom Vanny, Judith Just, Susan Gaio, Donna Kerner, Ginny Powell, and John Hughes. This is Reverend Jason Fairbanks, pastor of First Congregational Church of Christ at 1415 North K Street. He's co-president of Peace, People Engaged in Active Community Efforts, with an office at 100 North Palmway. On behalf of First Congregational United Church of Christ and Peace, I would like to speak in favor of the creation of a task force to make recommendations to the City Commission on the issue of eradicating systemic racism in the city. An honest, open, systematic assessment of where we are could help us move beyond partisanship and sound bites towards a community where all residents are treated equally. Peace is a network of 18 congregations in Palm Beach County, including First Congregational and St. Andrew's Episcopal Church here in Lake Worth, that seeks and advocates for solutions to serious issues facing residents of Palm Beach County. One recent issue we have taken up is the availability of the community ID of the Palm Beaches, an identification card administered by the Legal Aid Society to provide a proof of residency and identification for those in the county who are unable to access state-issued identification. For the past 2 years, we have been researching opportunities to assess the relationship between police department and people of color in Palm Beach County. We took up this task because stories we heard from Black and brown-skinned members of our congregation who reported interactions with law enforcement officers that included traffic stops for reasons such as, quote, not stopping at the white line at a stop sign, end quote, and quote, light too dim on a license plate, end quote, and sometimes for no given reason. Since these stops often did not involve a citation or written warning, no information was collected about the stop. Upon further research with experts in other municipalities across the country, we learned that an effective way to uncover possible issues of bias parens even more effective than body cams, and parens is to collect and analyze data for all traffic stops, including the reason for the stop, the race of the person stopped, and whether or not a search of the vehicle was conducted. Such a program reveals any possible issues of bias within the police department, protects the safety and dignity of officers and residents, and cultivates a culture of trust in the community. We are in conversations with the police departments of Delray Beach, Boynton Beach, and Jupiter about implementing such a program. While we've requested to meet with Sheriff Bradshaw to discuss this, we have yet to be granted the opportunity. If that request was to come from the city of Lake Worth Beach and other municipalities that employ the services of the sheriff's office, such a program could easily become a reality. Thank you for your consideration of creating a task force. This implementation would benefit our city and its residents, as well as a great example for our county. Next one is from excuse me, Pastor Tony Cato of New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, 819 Washington Avenue, and he wants to briefly share his feelings relative to assembling a task force to address the current climate of unrest. Concerning the unrest, I write this with a bit of uncertainty as to what is really being done. However, if what I've heard is accurate, the unrest taking place in our country is a result of 400 plus years of sickening inequality, and it cannot possibly be addressed by a task force who do not and cannot relate to the experiences of those having felt and still feel the impact of systemic racism. If the city is doing something to seriously address this problem and not simply put a Band-Aid on the wound, then I applaud Lake Worth Beach, and I pray that it can be a model for racial inclusiveness. Please let me know if I can assist, and I pray the absolute best for the city of Lake Worth Beach moving forward. Sam Goodstein writes, June 16th, writes, speaking on behalf of Whispering Palms Neighborhood Association and its president, Retha Lowe, we request that the membership of the task force be representative of the community with a special mind to areas like ours that have borne the brunt of the experience of historical disparities in services, budgeting, and planning. Examination of past injustices must be central to the discussion. We are especially grateful to Commissioner Maxwell, who we know will support redressing these deficits by defunding the police and refunding the community programs that prevent the origination of criminality. We call on him to acknowledge how white privilege has helped him in order to awaken in those he influences as understanding of brotherhood. Noah Wilson of 1101 North A Street writes, I would like to comment on the proposed task force to examine systemic racism within the city. I am for the creation of this task force as it is an urgent matter that calls for decisive action. I would like to join the millions of others across the country calling for local governments to defund the police and divert that money to where it can have a positive impact in the community. We commit over a third of our budget to PBSO, while our infrastructure, schools, and public services remain underfunded. Our community, which is 60% Black and Hispanic, would benefit more from investing in these areas by giving more money to the sheriff. Sue Welsh writes, hello, Commissioner and City Manager. This is an opportune time for our city to reevaluate our contract with PBSO. As municipalities and counties around the country are embarking on the difficult discussion of the role policing in our society, I assure you this topic is no longer an option. It's a requirement. There are cities already trailblazing alternatives to veiled and heavily equipped enforcement of outdated and racist laws, replacing them with well-funded, equitable, and supportive social service programs and investigative policies for crime. While our contract is due for renewal in August, I urge you to explore what other cities like Camden, New Jersey, and other cities have implemented, along with the many proposals now finally coming to the table after decades of work within the social and racial justice movement. Kimberly Stokes, 1321 North L Street writes, I am skeptical of the effectiveness of a task force run by elected officials that has very broad focus.
Sorry,
Madam
Clerk, we had 2 cards from the same person.
Oops. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No worries.
I have several that are pretty much the same comment. So I put them together. I'll read the comment and then I'll read their names if it's okay with you.
Okay.
I am in favor of the proposed systemic racism task force. I want to divest 50% of the budget away from PBSO and reallocate to community services and infrastructure. That's written by Autumn Barksdale. A similar one by Tiffany Griffiths. A similar one by Catherine Clark. A similar one by Colin Barnt. A similar one by Nate Barksdale. A similar one by Bridget Marquez. A similar one by Jess Hawkins, a similar one by Bobby Love, and a similar one by Benjamin Brown. And then I only have about 4 more comments that they're pretty much the same, but they've added a little bit extra to it.
Okay.
This is by Jordan Clements of 403 North L Street. I am in favor of the systemic racism task force. I live and work in Lake Worth and have personally experienced the negative outcomes of police prejudice, which pales in comparison to what others face. The Lake Worth community, which is 60% Black and Hispanic, would benefit more from an investment in community service programs and infrastructure, which would have a more positive impact than funneling money into the sheriff's office. I'm calling for 50% of the 13 million committed to PBSO to instead go to our unfunded community where it will have a more positive impact. Todd Kimberlane of 320 North E Street writes, it has come to my attention that the police department PBSO receives roughly 50% of the city's Lake Worth annual budget. While public protection and safety are necessities, the amount given seems disproportionately large in view of the long list of other spending priorities. I am asking that a careful analysis of current spending levels be undertaken to determine how the current police budget can be reduced in favor of spending increases elsewhere within the community. Sienna M. writes, at 429 North D Street, writes, reallocate the gross amount of money spent on police surveillance and punitive measures in Lake Worth into programs that get to the root of our problems: housing for the homeless, money for our schools and for after-school activities and mentorship programs, rehabilitation programs, etc. Why is the library and the Jerome Golden Center being defunded and the police budget increased? Commissioners get money for their campaigns from the police, so they cannot be trusted to make budget decisions on their own. We need resident oversight of the police and the budget. Kara Jennings at 822 North C Street writes, good evening. We are seeing across our country, state, and county, people outraged by the excessive forces and excessive budgets of law enforcement officials. Here in Lake Worth, we spend upwards of 50% on policing, from the sheriff's budget increases to additional programs such as the license plate readers. We are spending a majority of our programmatic funds on policing. The city has a war on poor people as you target low-income neighborhoods with increased policing, increased code enforcement, and increased surveillance. Are these strategies actually improving public safety? If they are so effective, why do we continue to hear from so many residents that they are concerned about crime? The time has come for us to reassess how we address public safety. The current model is costly, ineffective, and racist. In January 2013, a woman named Angela Falcone was killed by PBSO in front of her home in Commissioner Amoroso's district. Did any of you ever look into her case? Was there any demand for change in policing so that a domestic violence call does not end up in a mother being killed while her young child was nearby? How many other Lake Worth residents have been killed by the police? How many file complaints? What are the main complaints filed with PBSO officers who patrol our streets? It is time you, as the elected leaders, know the answers to these questions. The PBSO budget has increased by over 1.3 million over the past 5 years. That is triple what you now allocate for the library. What a sad situation you've created in our community, slashing the library funding while you yearly increase the police budget. This is not sustainable. We deserve youth programs, affordable housing, regular library hours, more parks, but we will get none of this if you continue down the path of funding over-policing efforts. The time has come to divest from the police and reinvest in the important community programs and to hold the police accountable. And this is from Cameron Stempel. The oppressive presence of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department needs to be severely curtailed in Lake Worth. Members of the Lake Worth City Commission must ask themselves how they prefer to interact with the homeless population, with people experiencing mental illness, and with people exercising their freedoms of assembly and speech. Is their preference to send agents armed with deadly force and chemical weapons? The city's current contract with Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office indicates that is indeed their preference. We need to limit the scope of Sheriff Department activities and cut the budgets in half to reflect this. City Commission must also put a ban on chemical weapons such as tear gas. I hope that our Lake Worth City Commissioners will have the courage to protect the residents and visitors of Lake Worth from police violence, reduce the sheriff's budget, and ban chemical weapons. Mason Yoel of 1518 18th Avenue North writes, when community resources for mental health, substance use, and housing resources are limited, there tends to be an increase in environmental and social factors that lead to criminality. Jerome Golden was one of the few community resources that low-income individuals and families could receive these services. Part of the conversation about defunding the police needs to include reallocating funds from PBSO and investing them back into the community. They then can be used to provide the necessary supportive services that are crucial for communities to maintain their wellness, which limits the need and or involvement of law enforcement. Stephen Stellis of 101 3rd Avenue South writes, if your goal as an elected official is to serve your community as effectively as possible without any unnecessary financial waste, then defunding the police is a no-brainer, because police officers' primary role in our community is as a poorly trained social worker and healthcare professional. It would be more financially prudent to utilize people trained for the roles that the community needs more often. Simple statistics show that a regular citizen is more likely going to need a healthcare professional, a social worker, AAA, or any other basic community service that would cost the taxpayers less than a bloated police budget and limit the liability the city routinely faces when an armed man trained to shoot first when threatened is sent to de-escalate a situation he is neither prepared nor qualified for. Police budgets need to be used to pay for the community services that were cut to continually inflate police budgets for the past 25 years. I support the anti-racism task force and any measure meant to limit police authority and put it back in the hands of people who can help members of our community rather than hurt them. And this is our last public comment by Nick. Recent nationwide events have made the issue of police brutality and lack of accountability impossible to ignore. All across the country, we're seeing that people are fed up with police getting away with murder, fed up with unlimited police budgets, fed up with police departments that have more political power than the officials we elect, fed up with the fact that residents have no say over increasingly militarized police forces in their neighborhoods. As much as some want to paint a Lake Worth as a progressive haven, we are anything but when it comes to policing. Lake Worth spends over half of our budget on PBSO. The PBSO chopper flies in circles almost every single night at a cost of over $1,600 per hour. The current Lake Worth Commission has enacted punitive code enforcement campaigns in low-income neighborhoods of interest to developers. Sending PBSO with code enforcement on regular code sweeps taken broken window policing to a whole new level. As the US enters into a pandemic-induced recession in the midst of a larger decline, All the social pressures that lead to the recent nationwide unrest will only increase. We can either respond with more police, more punitive policies that criminalize working families and therefore generate more distrust and unrest, or we can invest in social services and programs that will get our residents through these times. We need to have more democracy, resident control over what we spend our money on, and that includes the contract with PBSO. We need to defund the police and refund programs that help people get and stay on their feet so that it doesn't take a riot for the voice to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Maxwell?
Well, I think we're coming probably to the end of this conversation. We're going to make a decision pretty soon. I just want to remind everybody, again, I have spoken with a number of individuals, affected parties, if you will, here in the community, individually and as a group. And to a person, no one supports the idea of a task force in this form. They are very much interested in, as we've all said and desired, to have a conversation. And that conversation should take us where we're going. That being said, you know, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of needs out there, a lot of things that government can do, a lot of things that society can do to help with the healing process. And while we can't do everything here in the city of Lake Worth, we can and must do what we can. And I think that starts and begins with listening first to our residents, and then, you know, deciding, making a decision on how to go forward based on their input and based on their support, because that's the only way we're going to get where we all want to be, and that is equality for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
Mr.
good.
Hardy? Mr. Hardy? You're muted.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments from the residents, and three comments in particular stood out to me. One was from a gentleman on the south end whose name I just didn't get. And he said that there's no evidence that deputies here would behave unprofessionally, basically, was his argument. And, you know, I just want to be clear. The deputies that I've dealt with here with PBSO, from, you know, the frontline guys all the way up to Captain Bear, all the way up to, you know, the lieutenants that work under him, and all the way up to Major Keene and Colonel Arroyo, you know, those folks have been extremely professional. But I think it's important that we acknowledge this is not about individuals. This is not about individuals. This is not about a few bad apples. It's about an apple cart. It's about the construction of the cart. And we're so busy looking at the fishes, we're not looking at the ocean. We're not looking at the water they're swimming in. This is about systems. And so I think one of our goals is, you know, regardless of, you know, whether the folks who are working here right now in PBSO are inclined to behave unprofessionally, the idea is to erect systems, incentives, disincentives, mechanisms of accountability, okay, to basically encourage the behavior we want and discourage the behavior we don't want, and have the ability to identify the behavior we don't want when it's happening and punish and hold accountable those folks who do. That is something we should desire, even if every single officer or deputy who works in this city were a literal choir boy singing on Sunday mornings at their church or in their synagogue or wherever, right? So this is about systems. This isn't about the behavior of individual officers. That's number one. And, you know, as far as the, minor crimes leading to large crimes, you know, there's been a lot of research about this, and there are lots of very smart folks who study this who would argue the opposite. But what I do know, when I look at these cases that we've seen, whether it was Eric Gardner, who was choked to death from an interaction that started how? He was supposedly illegally selling cigarettes in the subway. Whether it was George Floyd, who was murdered, and what was the beginning of that interaction with the police? Supposedly he had purchased cigarettes with a counterfeit $20 bill. Whether it was Dontrell Stevens, who in Palm Beach County was shot and paralyzed by PBSO, what was the genesis of that interaction? A moving violation on a bicycle. right? And so we need to have a serious conversation as to whether we want to spend our money increasing the number of interactions that members of the community have with the police over things that are, in the grand scheme of things, not worth spending $13.5 million on. And that doesn't account for the deputies that we have at the beach and walking around in the downtown that are paid for through other means, not in the general fund. And so that, to me, is the point of that. But to move on, there's this conversation from the letter from Don Rosenstein and folks, and Don knows I appreciate very much his counsel himself, having been a former legislator. He said basically that you shouldn't do a task force until you meet with the police. What I think Commissioner Robinson is proposing, and what I would support, is if we created a task force that is the vehicle for meeting with the police, right? And finally, from Tony Cato, who I love and appreciate, Pastor, I appreciate you. He said a task force that doesn't look like the community basic cannot possibly address this very thick matter. And I agree. And I think that speaks to the composition of the task force. This task force, if we are to do it, should be composed in a way that it proportionately represents the community and the community's interest. And that's very, very, very important. And so, I would like to move forward with this. I believe I made a motion, but I don't believe a date was included in my motion.
Let's see if anyone else has any comments too. Anyone? I see a bunch of hands. Commissioner Robinson.
I just want to add a date to my motion. We have a meeting, I believe, on Thursday. We need to be able to workshop this as quickly as possible. I don't want to wait till next week. I believe our next meeting after Thursday is July 7th. That's too late. So if we can do this Thursday or early next week at the latest by Tuesday, and have a meeting to discuss how we would figure out what a task force would look like, who it will be made up of, how quickly would it get to work, what would it cover, how would it operate, so on and so forth. If we want to have that discussion, it needs to be had, in my opinion, either Thursday or Tuesday. So I would, if staff, if it's possible, if staff has the bandwidth to make this a priority, to have a discussion like that on Thursday, I would like to amend my motion to provide a date specific for this special meeting.
City Manager, what do we have on Thursday? My backup stuff is behind me.
Madam Mayor, we have a presentation along with the school district on the free Wi-Fi program, and it's an update. And then there's an item from electric utilities and utilities in general to talk about the suspension of disconnects policy.
Okay.
So those are the two items on Thursday. It was the only time we could put them in there.
Do we have anything scheduled for Tuesday?
The 23rd is, I do not believe we have anything on the 23rd. Is that right, Clerk?
That's right.
Okay. Commissioner Maxwell?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I have
something.
clarification from the clerk. I believe I made the motion. Did we back out of that and move on to a different motion?
Well, Commissioner Maxwell, I wrote down that you withdrew your motion.
Okay. Just thank you.
Okay.
I'm not going to support this effort tonight. I just don't think it's the right thing to do. And my constituents, the folks that are on the ground, the folks that have had the experience, have all told me to a person that they don't feel this is the right mechanism right now to move forward. So I'm going to vote against this.
I have a question. All right. So the first thing I did was reach out to PBSO and Sheriff Bradshaw, right? And asked him, when we talked about the Obama.org, and that was the 8 can't wait. And it was the response from the sheriff in regards to all of those items, many of which have been sent to me in email forms, after everything's been going on and since the meeting, and they would address that. I mean, when are we going to have, okay, we just had all these people, and I'm asking you guys now, we just had all these people on asking questions and giving their comments about defunding the police. Okay. I know that was brought up at the meeting that you guys had on Monday, but when are we going to, if we're going to talk about all this, are we going to have real conversations about how you feel on defunding the police, or how you feel on whatever? I mean, are we going to just take on all of these things at once, or are we going to, Because if we're going to really attack this, we're going to have big conversations about all of these things. And I get excited about that just because I happen to remember when there were others in the community that tried to get rid of the police. And I remember living here and the crime levels and the stats, which were like, this is the decrease of crime, that line going down from when PBSO took over. And it wasn't because our guys were bad guys, that they didn't have resources and they didn't have a lot, all the guys that we have now. And we're going to get into these discussions. It's going to get heated because I remember why I got involved in this, and it was public safety. And I'm concerned that the very people that we're talking about helping are going to end up suffering the most if we defund the police department. So, I'm
matter for a task force to address. I think that's the perfect conversation for a task force. I think we need to figure out how to set up a task force, how to structure those conversations, who's going to be on the task force, and on what timeline will the task force work. And then we can have those discussions with PPSO, perhaps being a part of the task force as a member.
Right. I'm for supporting a task force, but also outlining what it is that we're going to actually be doing and how we're going to do that. I don't want a 10-member task force. If we're going to have an advisory board or a task force or whatever, it should be the same format that we appoint to. I don't think that the city commission, any members should be part of that task force, considering the fact that any item that comes before a task force is going to come back to us the same way that other boards make recommendations to us. I'm comfortable with doing it in that manner. If we have specific ways or categories that we want to talk about and debate in the next meeting, when we talk about how we're going to do it, let's hash that all out and figure that out. But I don't want to be rushed, and I want to be whatever. I want to do it right. I want to do it right and represent the people of this community. Commissioner, let me see who's up first there, Missy. Vice Mayor.
I agree with you, Madam Mayor. I want to do it right. I want to make sure that the residents weigh in and everybody is at the table that needs to be at the table. Originally it was said each one of us would take a line item. There's 5 line items. I would like to, have time to talk to the attorney and staff on like financial security commitment. I think it was brought up. We don't make those decisions. And some of the other things, I know our attorney, Pamela, you looked at some of this, but I think we need to look at it a little closer because a lot of the things here, it's a national issue. It's a county, state. I want to make sure that if we're having the conversation, we can actually get somewhere with the conversation and that people aren't buying in thinking, well, we can make those decisions locally when we don't have that ability. So, I don't know that I can vote for this tonight in the way that it's drafted. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
Yes, thank you very much. I've had my hand up for a while, and I've listened to a lot of verbiage again about listening, and then we don't want to set up a task force. There's selective input. I don't know. I'm afraid that when we talk to certain people, we know what we're going to get, what answer we're going to get, if we want to try and establish, it's 9:30. This is a difficult topic, and apparently we're agreeing to meet on the 23rd to narrow this down and make it more efficient. Listening is critical. We just heard from over 30 people that recognize this as a serious issue. So how much more are we going to put it off and not address financial security? Involves, say, the opportunity zone, we can affect that. Certainly, we heard enough about mental health that we can emphasize the importance to the sheriff's priority to budget mental health, and he certainly recognizes that mental health is one of his concerns, and he needs help with that. Education, the the system there is not equitable to everybody. Police, we've heard enough about police. Nobody's talking about defunding. What I'm concerned about is retaliation. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, but anyhow, I'm concerned about presenting ourselves in a bad light to the sheriff, and then suffering the consequences of offending the sheriff. We want to work together with the sheriff to make our community better. I am hoping that we meet on the 20th. I don't know how involved the staff needs to be. I know we have to do it virtually, but if we can have a meeting on the 23rd, set up the different methods of listening, and apparently nobody is considering the 5 with a commissioner as a committee chairman. I thought that was a more efficient way to address it. I would like to at least let the public know that that's what we're considering or going to be talking about on the 23rd, because I would expect to have public input on the 23rd. But police, education, housing, health and human services, and financial security. And those are broad topics that could be broken down into mental health, opportunity zones. It's open. And this talk about listening is, if we don't have a task force, then how are we going to listen to people? One-on-one with your best friends and the ones you agree with. I just, let's move on.
I agree with Commissioner Robinson. I agree with you. I think that if we can get together and start to fine tune, which is what I thought we were going to do tonight. If we can fine tune these items down to where, how the process is going to work, and some of the items on there or whatever. But again,
well, then I'm suggesting that we assign committee, if anybody else has any input on 5 topics, because there's 5 of us.
Yeah.
If Commissioner Hardy took police, you, Mayor, as the education person, took education. I've been involved in housing. Health and human services could be Andy, and the Compass, and the food services, and financial security would be Scott, and probably his district is more economically challenged than anybody else's. If there's any other way we want to approach this, let's do it, but let's do it.
now that's an appointing from us, right? To those
No,
things.
we would certainly, we've had enough input from the public. I've heard individually people volunteering to work to make our community better.
I'm asking, are you asking us to be a part of this board?
I'm asking if you want to be.
I think it should be independent of us. I don't think that any commissioner should be on this board.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner Hardy?
look, I specifically would like to participate in whatever task force exists. And look,
But you're leaving in a couple of months.
yeah, well, first of all, I live here, and I care about what happens here, and whether I serve on this body or not, I care about putting in place policies that will help bring about more equity in our community for Black folks and folks from the Latinx community. And, I could tell you, as somebody who grew up Black, who still is Black, who will die Black, that as the second African-American in the history of this city, which is a super majority non-white city, I have some thoughts about how we can make things better. And this is, no offense, but this is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about personally. So the idea of me not being able to participate at a granular level as to the solutions me, the second Black African-American elected official in the history of the city that was founded by slaves, the idea that I wouldn't be able to participate in that task force rubs me, frankly, the wrong way. Secondly, I frankly have an issue with the way that our boards are appointed now. I would like there to be some sort of equal representation on the board, not having 3 commissioners that have 1 appointment and 1 commissioner who's currently the vice mayor having 2 appointments and the mayor having 2. I'm not for that. And that frankly would be a reworking of exactly what this commission would be, except the numbers would be even more representative of individual members of this commission.
That's not fair to say.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, when you have a 5-member body and, you're saying that we would appoint them on the same basis that we appoint our advisory boards, and those boards have a majority of the members appointed from 2 members of this commission, that's problematic. If for all of our 7-member advisory boards, okay, 4 of the members are appointed by 2 commissioners, or the mayor and the vice mayor. I have a problem with that right now, and I would have a problem with that on a task force. And so, I think frankly, commissioners should have the option to appoint or to serve on the task force themselves. And on the idea that a task force with lots of members, 10 or more, if it said 20 to 30 would be unwieldy and impossible to work with. There's a task force in this county that has been the most effective task force probably in the last 10 years, and Commissioner Amoroso serves on it, and it has 27 members. Commissioner Amoroso is aware that the Sober Home Task Force has 27 members. He serves on it. It's been effective. It is evidence that contradicts the claim that he's made that a large task force can't possibly be effective. And so,
information, I think that was made, that the reason being is that we don't have the staff to support a
Point of order, yes, you're putting words in my mouth.
Well, I'm sorry. Well, I don't know if that's a point of order, but my point is,
well, you make a decision.
I'll make the point of order. That was a point of information, just correcting you, because the staff would have to oversee this. We'd have to find all the people to do that. We'd have to find an attorney to do it.
And it should be a priority for staff. It should be a priority for staff for how I was watching the George Floyd Memorial, and they one of the speakers there read one of my favorite scriptures from I believe it's Proverbs, and basically it goes, "How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? Just a little rest, just a little folding of hands," right? And that is how you become ruined, is basically the gist of the scripture. We have been waiting 400 years to make real action, to make sure that the humanity of people of color, Black folk, is fully taken into account. How much longer will we wait for this, right? How much more procrastination will we create? Right now we have a government with 5 people on a commission who could do action. Now all of a sudden folks are talking about basically, doing small d democracy here. That's not our form of government. We have a representative democracy here. We're empowered to make decisions. All we're saying is make a task force, make it representative, put it on a deadline, and let's get to work. Let's get to work. And I
as far as I know, the only African American who made a public comment tonight said that we should delay a task force.
There were at least 2 people who were African American who made public comment. Yeah. So
No, I want to have a task force. I'm willing to have this conversation. I'm willing to go down all the paths that you're asking. I don't think a 10, 20 member task force is realistic for our city to be able to function and operate, for the management and the staff to be able to handle it. Number one, I think that we should get to all the organizations, and I want Tony Cato there, and I want other people in the community, and I want, I'm not looking to be a face of the task crew. I want people that are directly affected by this issue to be a part of this task force to make those solutions. I'm looking for that. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. And I hate when we end up in circles like this, because it looks like we're fighting and we're really not fighting. We're just coming at the same issue from different directions.
And are you proposing that we meet as a commission, 5-member task force? Or how do you want to do it?
Well, I think we come back and bring this back on Tuesday so we can start to to talk about the particulars, because I think I would like everyone to go home and take a look at Herman, Commissioner Robinson, what you proposed, and talk about what changes to reach out to the community, the people that, were calling you, and I'm sure if you got as many emails as I did, to see what it is that we can do about it. Let's come up with something that we can all agree on, please, to move forward with this and have good, relevant conversation that changes people's lives for our community. And let's work with the other organizations to start talking about national policies and regional policies that we can affect through our, working together with other communities. Let's not forget that too, because there's power in our numbers. But let's see what our community needs first and create our own approach that we can get started with, at a more rapid pace, and that we can start listening to the community and its needs. I mean,
Are you suggesting on the 23rd, then we are actually going to establish
I would like to establish the directors of a task force. Yes. Something that's realistic for our community that we can handle. And I'd like to meet with staff to see how much they can actually handle and what we can do to staff it too.
Staff,
There's other obligations.
Well, in this,
add an additional task force is what I meant by that. Sorry. We already have our hands full and we're viral right now, and we're whatever, everything we add to their work level or whatever needs to be addressed by the attorneys, by everyone behind it, to see what we have to create the ordinance, whatever it is that we have to do, everyone's gonna have to work on it. So let's work together.
a demonstration of the system not addressing the problem. We can put it off, we can blame it on staff, we can not take the leadership role,
I'm asking to meet on Tuesday.
and we can
Let's
talk
do it.
about it.
Let's do it.
I'm asking to meet on Tuesday and come back with your best, and let's talk and debate and do what we got to do to set it and move it forward.
Well, in the meantime, I hope that we do not overburden staff and use that as an excuse not to meet as a body, as 5 people that need to work together to address.
I'm trying, gentlemen, please. I'm trying here. I just, we just, like I said, we all want a lot of the same things. We just come at it from entirely different ways. And, it's not helping us.
Well, this conversation about listening, I'm confused as to if we're not going to have some method of listening, what are we going to do?
I think three of us I think 3 of us are in agreement that we want to try forming a task force. I think 3 of us maybe disagree as to the composition of the task force, how many members it should have, and what topics it should hold. I think the meeting on Tuesday should tackle the form of the task force, and I think the task force itself should tackle the substance of its focus. And I think perhaps we should be prepared to offer individually our visions of what a task force should look like. And we can come to that meeting on Tuesday prepared to compromise as to the form of the task force, who it's going to be, made up of, so on and so forth. That's what I see. I see 3 people, the mayor, Commissioner Robinson, and me, who seem to be for a task force. I think we disagree as to the particulars of its form. Am I wrong about that, Madam Mayor?
No, you're partly correct, but I just want to add something. Just be careful, because for consistency purposes, remember the task force that we had, which was the Finance Advisory Committee? Do you remember when we had that? And do you remember when there was a member of that Finance Advisory Committee that I think you were very against at that time, who had created his own agenda? And you were very angry about that because they created an agenda that wasn't in line with what you wanted them to be covering.
Well,
you made one comment in your last statement. This is the only thing I want to just say, and I'll shut up. You made one comment that we should let them set their own agendas. I just want you to remind you that when you do that, it's a sticky wicket. We should have an outline and a forum for people to come to the conclusions of it, but not to create their own agenda items.
Well, so what's critical, I think, is that that board that we're talking about, the chair of that board, unlike the chairs of other boards, did not have the authority as expressed by the ordinance that created that board to schedule meetings on his own. And that was the issue that council had pointed out to us. And the real issue with that particular board and board member was that there was an attempt to have a meeting that wasn't properly noticed. And that was the crux of the issue. This is something different. It's a task force. Who knows what its membership will be at this point? That's something we're going to discuss on Tuesday. I do think we should hand issues to the task force in broad strokes. But as far as particulars, the substance of it, I think the task force needs to figure that out if there's going to be a task force at all. If we're going to tell the task force, y'all need to think about body cameras and this and that and this and that, well, we might as well do the task force's job. But we should allow, I think, after forming it, we should form it in a way that the task force has some autonomy. And I'm comfortable saying that if, as someone who's interested in how this turns out, if I get to participate in it. That's just me and having my peace of mind. And there are other, for example, like the Criminal Justice Commission has, I believe, 3 members of the county commission on it, right? And even though things from the Criminal Justice Commission come back to the Board of County Commissioners, right? So there's nothing wrong with having a board or a body that can do stuff and come up with recommendations and having electeds on that body. So, hey,
No,
I'm prepared to come to Tuesday.
I agree with you on that, but now here's the thing. Here's where I get kind of stuck in the quagmire here. I get stuck because I listen to things like some of the comments that I heard at the meeting on Monday, right? And I listen to those and I look at some of the things that the sheriff has already, we already went through the process. In fact, some of our processes in Palm Beach County are now being used nationally to do certain, there's certain things, like I heard a comment, somebody was talking about decriminalization of marijuana in small quantities or whatever. That happened 2 years ago.
But
it was already on. No, I'm just saying, how do you assign something and then let them see? Is it a whole educational process when it's new items, or like, how do you say that the sheriff's always supported body cameras, but he needs $19 million to do it, and the county commission would need to pay? How do you open those conversations up when they're already talking about them?
Let's address some of that. When the county commission brought up the issue of body cameras several years ago, the sheriff was not for it. And that was before I got elected. He was reticent to adopt that, which is why, there was no movement or motion in that direction. Now, since several years ago, the sheriff has changed his mind. And the issue is now, where do we get the money? And frankly, at the tail end of the Obama administration, hundreds of millions of dollars were available to local law enforcement agencies through the Bureau of Justice Assistance to get the startup costs for body cameras. And now that money is not there. There's a different administration. And so it's more difficult. But the sheriff has a budget that's over $700 million. We're talking about something that would amount to 2, maybe 3% of his budget. And, we talk about, percents of our budget in terms of 2 or 3%. If something was a priority for us, we could figure out 2 to 3% of our, of our budget. And so, this idea, let's put it all on the county commission. The sheriff has a tremendous budget, and if it were a priority, I feel that it would have happened. I'm very interested to hear from him about how strongly he feels body cameras are needed, and I'm sure that he's willing to, if he feels that strongly about it, maybe there's a compromise on both sides of the issue to be made with the county commission. Now, on the issue of the 8 can't wait and things of that nature, the 8 can't wait stuff is some really, really basic stuff. Don't shoot at moving cars. Okay. Warn people before you shoot them. Okay. Don't choke people out. Okay. But there are much more, I don't want to say advanced, but
the de-escalation processes. Yes.
Right.
And they're actually quite intricate. If you look them up, you can see the different areas.
But even basic stuff like there are public records in the sheriff's possession. Rather than having people 119 these public records or request them formally, why not just put them on the website in an easy to find place? The policies and rules of deputy conduct, closed investigations about officer conduct. When someone files a complaint, it's been investigated, it's been decided, and there's been a reprimand or whatever. make that, don't make people ask for that information. The contract with the union, for example, these are very basic things that are free, that don't cost PVSO anything.
Madam Mayor, point of order.
Okay, I accept the point of order.
We're getting off.
The point of order.
No, and I appreciate that. Continue, if you
Yeah.
want to just finish it out.
No, I accept the point of order. We're getting off topic. I look
Okay.
forward to showing up on Tuesday to discuss the form that a potential task force may take, and being able to vote yay or nay on some form of a task force that hopefully can be representative of the community.
And just one little tidbit, if I could, Commissioner Hardy, take a look at what happened at the end of President Obama's administration when cities could take advantage of that fund.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at what happened in Los Angeles, because they changed over their entire system, bought new servers, pulled everything, brought out the technology, and it went completely out of date in 2 years, and they had to refund the whole program because there were no other systems in place. So, and it changed, the technology changed so quickly. But just do me a favor, take a look at what happened to them. So when we come back and talk about it, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Maxwell?
Thank you. I'd like to offer a subsidiary motion, please.
Okay.
I'd like to direct staff to come back with some direction with respect to how we can utilize either the National League of Cities or the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the resources they have available to them to give us guidance on how to establish a task force that provides for the affected parties here in the city of Lake Worth Beach to be directly involved in the process. So we can figure out what it is that the community is feeling and what their needs are and how we may address them going forward.
Okay, so you're bypassing the original motion that was to meet on Tuesday?
That was my motion.
Okay, do I have a second? I don't have a second.
Second.
Okay,
Point of information.
go ahead.
Is this motion a motion to amend the original motion? Because that would make it a subsidiary motion. Is this motion to amend the original motion?
Commissioner Maxwell?
He withdrew his original motion.
No, I made the original, well, yeah, so he made the original motion, it died for lack of or rather he withdrew it. Then I made a motion which was seconded by Commissioner Robinson.
Right.
And he's now making a subsidiary motion, and I'm wondering, is that an amendment to the motion that I made?
Oh, you can call it whatever you like, Commissioner.
Well, what is its function?
City Attorney?
I have forgotten what the original motion was.
The original motion was to
Set a special meeting to form a task force, and then it was amended to on June 23rd.
Mm-hmm. And
Commissioner Maxwell's motion was to, can you repeat?
Basically, what I'm trying to get at, Madam Mayor, is we need to bring in professionals to help us facilitate any process that we're going to undertake. That's what I'm looking for right now.
how does it relate to this motion? To the, to the
relates,
motion that was on the floor?
relates to the fact that we're rushing ahead here. We're forcing, an item here that the community that I have spoken with clearly does not want. So, that's what this is all about. And we've heard the public comment tonight. Okay, they clearly don't want a top-down approach to having a conversation. And all I'm asking is that we bring in professionals that can help us work directly with the community, so all parties, the five of us, can all feel that we have, done what's right for the community.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I still don't, so there was a motion on the table, which was basically to set a special meeting about a topic and to provide a date for that meeting. The gentleman who represents District 1, has made another motion, but I'm not clear about the relationship between his motion and the motion that was on the floor.
That's how I was about yours earlier.
Mine was a motion to amend. His is a motion.
Yours was a motion to replace.
And I'm trying to understand why is this a delay tactic, Commissioner Maxwell, or why
Commissioner
don't you bring that
Commissioner Robinson.
information back on the
One at a time.
23rd?
I take great exception to that, Commissioner Robinson.
Well,
I take exception to
One
that.
at a time, point of order, one at a time, gentlemen.
I'm asking
I
you
will
to
let
bring
you
that
both
information
speak if you will
that
speak
you're looking
one at
for on
a
the
time.
23rd.
Point
I
of
don't
order.
have a gavel. Hello, I point of ordered. Thank you. Commissioner Robinson, you may speak, and then Commissioner Maxwell, please follow him. Thank you. Commissioner Robinson, we're
Well-
still having a meeting here, guys.
It's nigh on to 10 o'clock. I don't want to belabor this, but Commissioner Maxwell's suggestion of, I don't know what, is certainly something that we could hear about on the 23rd. Finished
Okay.
business.
Okay, Commissioner Maxwell.
I partially could agree with Commissioner Robinson. However, I do not want to have a conversation about the 5 items that have been presented here tonight. Again, that is a top-down approach to the process.
Okay, I
If you want to have
understand
a
that.
meeting-
Alternative.
So we've got
if
a
you
motion
want
on
to
the
have a
floor.
meeting about creating a task force that embraces the affected parties specifically.
Yes.
Well, that's not what I'm hearing all night.
Okay, well, here's an idea. We've got a subsidiary motion and a second by the Vice
Point of
Mayor Pro
order.
Tem
Point
and then
of
made by the.
Point
Excuse
of
me,
order.
hold on 1 second. We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor state so by
Point
saying
of order,
aye.
point of order, point of order.
What?
He made a motion, he called it subsidiary. There is a list of subsidiary motions, and his is not one of those. You know, you can make a motion to lay on the table, motion to postpone, motion to commit, motion to the previous question, motion to amend.
City attorney
His
has already
motion
said that she
doesn't
can make a
take the
subsidiary
form
motion.
of any subsidiary
Okay,
motion.
I'm gonna make you all happy. Ready? We got a motion and a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye on the subsidiary motion.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
I'm opposed.
Ready? Now we're gonna go back to the original motion. We've got a motion on the floor in a second. The original motion made. All those in favor state so by saying aye. Aye.
For a meeting on the
Aye.
23rd?
I'm for the original motion, but Matt, this is.
I just completely got you guys both to merge together so you both can hear your point as Commissioner Robinson and Commissioner Maxwell decided
This
to
is
do.
totally out of order.
We've got a meeting on this, on the 22nd, is it the date? And we're also gonna be
23rd.
discussing both items.
Madam Attorney,
Yes.
did
Madam
we not-
Attorney?
did we not just vote to have staff, bring in professional staff?
Right. I think, so trying to put everything together, I think we are having a meeting on the 23rd to talk about a task force. Staff will try to have somebody from the League of Cities, national or local, who can help you all in your discussion about the task force. That's what I'm hearing. That the issue of the
We
task
can
force is
start
still
the
pretty much live,
conversation.
because
We're
that
never
was.
gonna get anywhere, guys. We're never gonna get anywhere going back and forth on this, and no one's gonna be happy. So let's get this process going and let's bring in people, but let's also consider the process and how we're gonna assign the task force, Commissioner Robinson and Commissioner Hardy. And let's bring in the other organizations that have already worked on this so they can give their suggestions on it. We can use best practices as well as our own community involvement and reaching out to our community and how we best do that first. I think it makes both sides happy and I'm happy. Are you happy? I don't think so. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Anyone want to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? You guys want to stay with me forever, don't you?
I have no idea.
I am
what just
so,
happened.
I know, we've got a
And-
motion in a
and
second.
So I have
You
I
both,
have no
you both
idea.
won. I'm tired of being the bad guy in the middle because you guys don't want to compromise. So guess what? I made you both compromise.
This isn't
We're
about
having a meeting and we're going to talk about everything
what the
together.
heck is going on.
We're going to have a meeting. We're going to talk about everything together. And I'm so excited about that. And it's going to be next week. We've got a motion and do I have a second on the adjournment there?
Can I get a, can
All
I
those
get,
in favor state so by saying aye. Oh, boy, no.
We don't have a second on that motion.
We need it because it's 1 minute to 10. Who's going to give me the second?
can I get an
Give me the second.
understanding?
Did I have a second?
Can
All
I
right.
get an understanding?
Well, we have to end the meeting at 10 o'clock unless you want to extend the meeting.
1
I
minute.
got a second from Commissioner Maxwell. All those in favor state so by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
I'd like
Motion
an
carries. Thank you.
Nay.
Good night.